This girl isn't as simple as she seems. She came to the psychologist's office for therapy, but ended up hypnotizing the doctor instead. Yi Jingwen only stared at the rapidly spinning pencil in the girl's hand for a few seconds before he started feeling dizzy. Wait, what's going on? How did their roles suddenly switch? Wasn't he the psychologist? Yet, here he was, completely dominated by this young girl. Looking at the case file he had memorized long ago, Yi Jingwen smiled and said, "Lu Mion, can we talk like friends? Your family is really worried about you. They hope I can learn more about what happened. Can you tell me what went on during those 2 years when you were kidnapped?" Lu Mion's face showed a hint of rebelliousness and defiance. "I forgot." Yi Jingwen's brows furrowed slightly. "Do you remember the mysterious person who rescued you?" The girl calmly took a sip of her tea. "Nope, don't remember." Yi Jingwen, keeping his patience, continued trying to break through. "How do you feel about your parents and your sister?" The girl replied nonchalantly, "They're fine, I guess." Yi Jingwen felt a deep sense of frustration. This was already the 4th session, and each time, it was the same answers. This girl was definitely the second toughest person he had ever encountered. As for the first one? Well, everyone would find out soon enough. The clock struck 10, chiming twice. It was as if Lu Mion had completed a task. She put the pencil down on the table. "Session's over. I'm leaving now." She got up and headed for the door. Yi Jingwen hurried after her and blurted out, "I don't mean any harm. I just want to help you." Lu Mion turned her head, coughed lightly, and said, "Dr. Yi, don't you get tired pretending to care about your patients?" Yi Jingwen almost choked. This girl really knew how to shut people down. Turns out, Lu Mion and her twin sister, Lu Xinwan, were once caught up in a kidnapping case that shocked the world. The ransom demanded by the kidnappers was so outrageously high that many families faced an impossible choice. Their mother scraped together every penny she could, begging the kidnappers to release her children, but the greedy kidnappers said 5 million could only save one. When the kidnappers asked her which one to save, the decision became even harder. Lu Xinwan cried in fear, begging her mom to save her, while Lu Mion, who had her neck being choked, stayed calm and tried to comfort her, saying, "Don't be scared, we'll be okay." The kidnappers laughed like they were having a great time, watching their mom tremble. "How about you get more money and not have to worry about who to choose?" they taunted. Their mother hesitated for a few seconds, shaking, but then made a firm decision and shouted, "Save my younger daughter." Lu Mion's eyes widened in disbelief. When she saw her mother turn away, comforting her sister as she left, it finally hit her: she had been abandoned by her own family. She wiped her tears away. If she had been left behind, there was nothing to lose. In the end, 5 kids were abandoned by their families. Then, like a hero from nowhere, a mysterious person appeared, took down all the kidnappers, and saved them all. Nobody knew this person's real identity, just the code name, 13. It wasn't until 2 years after the kidnapping that Lu Mion returned to her family. No one knew where she had been or what she had gone through. Instead of offering her comfort and love, her parents and family treated her like some kind of freak and sent her to a therapist. After dealing with Yi Jingwen, Lu Mion, before leaving, shot a meaningful smile at the security camera on the wall. Sure enough, in the next room, a scholarly-looking man with gold-rimmed glasses was intently watching the monitor. The two of them seemed to exchange a silent look through the screen. Yi Jingwen sighed and tossed the case file on the coffee table, saying, "Seventh brother, you saw that, right? I couldn't get anything out of her. If you're hoping to find this mysterious person by talking to Lu Mion, it's not going to be that easy. But don't worry, even if she doesn't talk, we still have the other 4 victims. They were all rescued by this mysterious person. We'll get something out of them." Xiao Qimor adjusted his glasses and calmly replied, "It's useless. The person with the code name 13 has already wiped all traces of the other 4 victims' identities. There's no way to find them under their new identities." Yi Jingwen was stunned. "Seriously? That good?" Then what about Lu Mion? Xiao Qimor replied, it seems the person known as 13 didn't have time to erase her information before my people found her. Hearing this, Yi Jingwen's expression darkened a bit. So, how do you think Lu Mion is supposed to face her parents who once gave up on her? And what about her younger sister, who was kidnapped with her? Xiao Qimor stood up and walked over to the window. That's not for you to worry about. He gently opened the blinds and peeked down. Oh, and a little reminder, next time, don't watch her spin that pen. A cold sweat instantly broke out on Yi Jingwen's back. Wait, are you saying a psychologist, actually got hypnotized by a patient? What else did she notice? Xiao Qimor thought for a moment and replied, she's pretty interesting to watch. Yi Jingwen was puzzled, thinking, seriously? You've been watching the footage all this time and that's all you noticed? But what surprised Xiao Qimor was that at that very moment, Lu Mion was casually eating an ice cream and looking up at him, as if she knew someone was spying on her from the window. Xiao Qimor was taken aback. This girl really is something, huh? I mean, how biased can a mother be? Faced with 2 kidnapped daughters and only able to save one, she didn't even look back before choosing the seemingly well-behaved younger one and coldly abandoning the more rebellious older sister. When Lu Xinyuan got home from school, Fu Man immediately greeted her with a big smile, taking her backpack. Sweetheart, you're back. Dinner will be ready soon. I made all your favorite dishes. Lu Xinyuan proudly pulled out a certificate. Mom, look! I got first place in the art competition last semester. My teacher even wants to submit this series of drawings to a game company as character designs. Fu Man asked excitedly, really? Is it the game company that's won several international awards? Nuanuan, you're amazing. Not only are you doing great in school, but you also won first place in art. Our family's future depends on you. Fu Man looked at the certificate from all angles, feeling incredibly pleased. Their side of the family, the main branch, wasn't as well off as the second branch. The second branch lived in the main building and controlled the Lu family's financial resources, while they were stuck in the side wing. To get Xinyuan back, they even had to take on a lot of debt. But now that her younger daughter was doing so well, maybe one day they could compete with the second branch. Lu Xinyuan said confidently, I definitely won't let you down. By the way, where's my sister? Is she back yet? Fu Man sighed at the mention of Lu Mion. Not yet. I wish your sister was even half as easy to deal with as you are. The psychologist just called and said they can't help her anymore, must be another one of your sister's crazy episodes. Lu Xinyuan seemed to remember something. Maybe I shouldn't show her this certificate. I don't want to upset her. Remember how she ruined my drawings when we were kids? She hasn't touched a paintbrush since. Feeling sorry for her, Fu Man gently patted her head. Lu Mion has been hard to get along with ever since she was little. She always lied and made excuses, denying she ever did anything wrong. We really can't count on her. Suddenly, a mocking voice came from the doorway. Sorry, did I interrupt your little mother-daughter bonding session? Lu Mion was leaning casually against the bookshelf, smirking. Lu Xinyuan's expression shifted immediately. She smiled and ran over to grab her sister's hand. Sis, you're back. Lu Mion glanced at her, quietly pulling her hand away. Drama queen, she muttered. Lu Xinyuan quickly switched to a hurt expression. Sis, do you really hate me that much? Fu Man immediately stepped in to shield her and scolded Lu Mion, how can you treat your sister like that? Lu Xinyuan's eyes filled with tears. Mom, don't scold her. I know she's never liked me. After what happened, it's understandable. But, sis, you don't blame me, do you? You shouldn't be mad at Mom either. She's always felt guilty. We took a 2-month trip to help her relax. Now she's working for Uncle to pay off our debts. It's hard work, and the pay is so low. Lu Mion was really tired of watching her sister put on an act. She walked over step by step, gently wiping the tears from Lu Xinyuan's eyes. Then, she lifted her chin with a casual hand and coldly spat out, "It's a shame you aren't an actress." Turning to her mother, she added, "And as for the debt? She took it on for you, not me. So, what does it have to do with me? You two can keep on with your mother-daughter love fest." With that, she turned and headed upstairs. Lu Xinyuan was clearly thrown off by her words, but suddenly remembered something and decided to turn things around. This seemingly sweet and considerate girl was actually a two-faced manipulator. From childhood until now, she had secretly smeared her sister's reputation to win more of their mother's affection. As a result, everyone thought Lu Mion was just a rebellious delinquent. Trying to show off in front of her mother, Lu Xinyuan deliberately said to Lu Mion, "Su Ju invited me over for dinner this Saturday. His grandfather is back. You're not upset, right? I remember when you were 16, you gave him a love letter. Sis, you're not in love with him, are you?" Lu Mion looked completely puzzled. "What love letter?" "That was an invitation from old man Su that I didn't want, so I gave it back to his mom." Their mother's anger flared up again. "Can you say a single honest word? If you're jealous of your sister, just admit it. Why would old man Su give you an invitation?" If anyone else heard this, they'd laugh their heads off. "How did I end up with such a liar for a daughter? You go around claiming you've memorized textbooks, don't need exams, and even saved a life. When you were younger, people thought you were just talking nonsense, but now you're an adult and still like this?" Lu Xinyuan fanned the flames. "Mom, don't get mad. Maybe sis just wants to visit the Su family." Fu Man, looking like she was beyond disappointed, turned her face away. What would she do there? She doesn't know the first thing about music, chess, calligraphy, or painting. She'd just embarrass herself. Lu Mion couldn't be bothered with them anymore and continued up the stairs. When she was younger, she had tried so hard to prove herself to them, only to be labeled as a lunatic. It was laughable. She slammed the door shut, blocking out the insults from outside. She pulled out her phone and saw several messages from her friend, Xin Fuling, praising her for making a tidy profit trading stocks over the past 2 days. Lu Mion simply replied with boring and ignored her. Suddenly, her phone dinged with a new email. It was an invitation from the Su family. Lu Mion hesitated for a few seconds, wondering if she should go or not. She changed clothes and was about to head out when Fu Man caught up to her, annoyed. "Where are you going?" she asked. Without turning around, Lu Mion replied, "Central Street." Fu Man glanced disdainfully at her slightly worn and short denim shorts. "I was just about to take Xinyuan to the mall there to buy a dress. Might as well get you a couple of things too." At the mall, the mother and daughter browsed different brands, shopping around. Lu Mion didn't want to be involved, so she lazily followed behind them. At the jewelry counter on the first floor, she immediately spotted a hairpin set with a blue diamond, priced at 300,000 yuan. She was about to ask the clerk to take it out for a closer look when Fu Man suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled her away. "We're here to buy clothes today. Don't bother looking at such expensive stuff." Lu Xinyuan, playing the good daughter, lowered her eyes and said, "If sis likes it, I won't buy a dress. We can spend more on sis instead." Fu Man quickly acted out a scene of mother-daughter affection. "No way. You have to visit the Su family tomorrow. Even if we don't buy for your sister, we have to buy for you first." Lu Mion scoffed with a playful, mocking tone. "I don't want anything. I'm just browsing." She turned back toward the counter. "You two go shop. Don't bother getting me anything." Once they were far away, Lu Mion took out a black card from her bag. "Wrap up that hairpin for me," she told the clerk. "I'm keeping it for myself, so make it look nice." The clerk was thrilled. Those two customers just now clearly didn't have the confidence to be in this store. But this young lady, generous and confident, was truly a sweet yet cool girl. The prestigious Su family was throwing a welcome-back banquet for their old master, who had just returned from abroad, attracting all those looking to cozy up to them. Without seeing the guest of honor, everyone started talking about Su Ju, the 19-year-old from the Su family. rumor had it that he made a whopping 11 million yuan from just 200,000 yuan in the stock market a couple of days ago, a feat comparable to the legendary trader Mr. Xiao Qimo. Only the second branch of the Liu family, who held the real power, was invited to such events. Lu Xinyuan, looking sweet and delicate, shyly asked her uncle and aunt, "Do I look okay like this? I don't want to embarrass the Liu family." Lu Xingtang nodded approvingly. Winning such a big award for your art already brings enough pride to the Liu family. Besides you, who among the Su, Yi, or Pei families could compare? If Xin Yuan could marry into the Su family, our Liu family would surely rise even higher. When they arrived at the Su family estate, Lu Xingtang wasted no time introducing her to the head of the Su family, Su Shang. Su Sheng, smiling kindly, looked at the girl and said, "I didn't expect Nuan to grow up so gracefully. Once the old master gives his approval, we can solidify this family connection." Lu Xingtang chimed in with a laugh, getting the old master's blessing would be the best. "She's my only niece, so you all better take good care of her." Lu Xinyuan blushed, "Uncle, I'm still young." Su Sheng quickly intervened. Su Ju went to the back garden to see Grandpa. "You should head over there too." Determined, Lu Xinyuan thought to herself that she was definitely going to become part of the Su family. Meanwhile, Lu Mion, who was wearing flip-flops, was casually wandering in the back garden. Soon, Su Ju noticed the unfamiliar girl and demanded, "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Lu Mion stopped in her tracks and countered, "Who are you?" Su Ju paused for a moment before stating, "I'm Su Ju, the young master of the Su family." Lu Mion simply nodded, "Oh, so you're old man Su's grandson. It's been years, I almost forgot you existed." She then ignored him and continued walking. Shocked at being dismissed, Su Ju chased after her, yelling, "Stop! That's my grandpa's study. You can't go in there." Lu Mion swiftly grabbed his wrist, flipped him around, and pinned him to the ground in one quick move. Just as Lu Xinyuan entered the back garden, she saw what was happening and started to cry out in alarm, "She's hitting him! Sis, let go of Su Ju!" But inside, she was secretly delighted. She thought, now uncle will definitely kick her out of the Lu family for this. Her shout brought a crowd rushing over. Lu Xingtang got there first and pulled Su Ju up from the ground. "Lu Mion, what are you doing? Apologize to Su Ju right now," he demanded. Lu Xinyuan cautiously suggested, "Maybe there's a misunderstanding? Sis, why don't you explain yourself to everyone?" But Lu Xingtang was furious. Misunderstanding? What misunderstanding could there be? Does she even have an invitation? Should she even be here? And now she's causing trouble. She wasn't invited, yet she had the nerve to show up and start something. The crowd that had gathered to watch the drama murmured among themselves, shooting odd looks at Lu Mion. So, this is the girl from the Lu family who got kidnapped for 2 years and only recently came back? Just look at her, she definitely seems like she's got some issues. Lu Xinyuan softly tried to persuade, "Maybe you should just go home for now?" But seeing the embarrassed look on Lu Mion's face made her feel quite satisfied. Even her uncle and aunt scolded Lu Mion angrily, "Why are you still here? Aren't you ashamed enough?" Suddenly, a strong voice rang out from a nearby building, "She's my guest. Who dares to kick her out?" Everyone turned to see who it was, and to their surprise, it was the old master of the Su family, Su Qinghe. The old master walked straight over to Lu Mion and declared to everyone, "I personally invited this girl. Who dares to say a word against her? Mion, come with me," he continued. His son quickly tried to stop him, "Dad, don't go, everyone's waiting for you." But the old master firmly refused, "I have other matters to attend to. You all enjoy the meal without me." Su Ju was feeling pretty annoyed. His grandpa wasn't worried about him at all and even sided with that troublesome girl. Lu Xinyuan gently tugged on his sleeve and tried to calm him down, "Don't be mad at my sister. She's just a bit impulsive and didn't mean it." But Su Ju wasn't having it. He thought, it's all that girl's fault, and now grandpa's definitely going to make her pay. Meanwhile, Lu Xinyuan was also feeling resentful. She had been hoping to meet old Master Su, but she didn't even get a chance to speak with him. Instead, Lu Mion, who didn't seem to care much about anything, became his special guest. At that moment, there was a Go board on the stone table in the pavilion with an unfinished game on it. Old Master Su poured Lu Mion a cup of tea and, instead of being angry about his grandson getting hurt, he apologized, saying Su Ju had a bad temper and that he'd scold him later that night. Lu Mion chuckled softly, "Your grandson is quite entertaining." Old Master Su sighed with regret, "I only learned about the kidnapping case later on. If I had known earlier, things would have been different." Lu Mion picked up a white Go piece and smiled, "I know you did your best. No need for a what if. Let's just say it was a life experience." Old Master Su then took a USB drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "This has the information I've collected over the past 2 years about the kidnapping case. I know you came here today for this." Lu Mion nodded, took the USB drive, and then placed a round talisman on the table. "I also came here today to return this to you." Old Master Su's eyes widened. "No, you keep it. If you ever run into someone from Jingjing, it might save your life." Lu Mion glanced at the USB drive in her hand and replied, "This is all I need." Meanwhile, Xiao Qimo and Yi Jingwen, catching the scent of blood, arrived in the back alley of the Su family's estate. They'd rushed over after getting an inside tip, but it seemed someone else had beaten them to the scene. All they found were chaotic footprints and bloodstains from a fierce battle. Yi Jingwen looked puzzled. Were those people targeting old Master Su? But who's the good Samaritan that stepped in? Xiao Qimo carefully examined the scene and deduced, based on the fight marks on the ground, this helpful person is about 170 centimeters tall, weighs around 42 kilograms, is quick on her feet, favors her right leg when attacking, and wears flip-flops. And it's a woman. Yi Jingwen swallowed hard. Who could this fierce woman be? Just as he was marveling, he saw a slim figure walk out of the Su family's back gate. "Lu Mion, what a coincidence," he called out, his expression mild. "Not really a coincidence," she replied calmly. "We were all invited." Yi Jingwen forced a dry smile. "Right, this is my friend, Xiao Qimo. Lu Mion, meet him." "Oh," Lu Mion responded with a nod. "So, it's you." Surprised, Yi Jingwen looked between them. "You two know each other?" Lu Mion gave a sly, carefree smile. "Dr. Yi, wasn't he the one behind the surveillance feed yesterday? Didn't he tell you some things?" Xiao Qimo's interest was piqued. "How did you figure that out? Just how skilled is this laid-back girl?" Lu Mion stared directly at him and began to explain slowly. "First, the doctor in the experiment room glanced at the surveillance 3 times yesterday, indicating someone was watching from behind the camera. Second, this is the first time we've met, yet your gaze isn't unfamiliar, you've seen me before. Third, Dr. Yi always defers to you, which suggests you're someone important. I also heard the Su family mention a notable Mr. Xiao would be attending this event, so I deduced that you're Xiao Qimo. Lastly, and most importantly, all of this was just me taking a wild guess, but both your reactions gave it away, proving I was right." Yi Jingwen was stunned. If they weren't on opposing sides, he'd have wanted to cheer for this girl on the spot. "She's that good." Xiao Qimo pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket and offered it. "Do you want to wipe your hands?" Lu Mion didn't hesitate, she took it and carefully wiped each finger. Xiao Qimo confidently remarked, "Then let me guess something too. You were the one who fought here earlier, right?" Lu Mion nodded without hesitation and then pointed to the fence. "I wanted to climb over it, but they were in the way." Li Jingwen's baby-faced expression twitched as he instantly imagined the scene. 2 hours ago, a wild and carefree girl tried to jump over the wall to get into the Su family's estate, only to find a row of assassins crouched at the base, blocking her path. Then, without missing a beat or a step, she knocked the whole group flat. She casually pointed behind her. "I tied them up in the back alley. If you need them, go ahead and pick them up." Yi Jingwen was in complete awe. She had unintentionally saved this whole event, and now he felt like a third wheel in front of these two powerhouses, like a forgotten dish no one ordered. Lu Mion twirled the handkerchief between her fingers. "You've probably got a ton of these, right? You won't miss one, will you?" She stuffed it into her pocket without a care. As she turned to leave, Xiao Qimor asked, "Aren't you going to stay for the banquet?" "Nah, too boring. You guys have fun." Meanwhile, inside the Su family banquet hall, the guests were still gossiping in groups, unaware of the disaster they just avoided. Was that really the younger daughter of the Lu family, whose sister had just returned after being kidnapped for 2 years? Old Mr. Su is such a good guy, trying to smooth things over. Judging by how her sister acts, I bet she's no different. Better steer clear of both of them from now on, just in case. But they didn't know that every word of their gossip had reached Xiao Qimor's ears. He paused just as he was about to step into the banquet hall. It didn't take long for people to notice him. Is that the heir of the Xiao family? Xiao Qimor scanned the room full of people eager to cozy up to him. So much for good breeding. As of now, the Xiao family is done doing business with you. We'll pay the penalty fees for the contracts. With that, he turned and walked out of the estate. The crowd was left in shock, clueless about what they had done to upset him. Yi Jingwen rushed to catch up. "Aren't you going to ask old Mr. Su about the kidnapping?" Xiao Qimor waved him off. "Nah, it's boring. You guys deal with it. Oh, and make sure to tell Mr. Su about the assassins in the back alley." Yi Jingwen scratched his head in confusion. Was he really leaving because the party was boring, or was it because people were trash-talking Lu Mion? Lu Xingtang was furious about Lu Mion's appearance. He had no intention of acknowledging his niece. It was just too embarrassing. Meanwhile, Lu Xinwan, after sending a quick message, sensibly tried to smooth things over. Maybe Grandpa Su is just protecting her because he feels bad for her. Just then, the sound of a cane hitting the floor echoed behind them. Suju was helping old Mr. Su walk over. Lu Xingtang quickly rushed forward to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mr. Su. Lu Mion's caused you trouble. I'll deal with her when I get back." Lu Xinwan faked an apologetic tone, adding, "Grandpa Su, don't be mad. I'll apologize on behalf of my sister." But old Mr. Su simply laughed heartily. "Oh, no need. Tell Mr. Lu to thank Lu Mion for me. If it weren't for her, the Su family would have been in big trouble today." The 3 members of the Lu family were stunned. Mr. Su didn't care about their confused expressions. His son, Su Sheng, helped him and asked, "Dad, how did you end up being targeted by assassins? You've always been on good terms with everyone." Old Mr. Su's sharp eyes gleamed as he replied, "Are you implying I'm so old and senile that I bring this on myself?" Su Sheng shook his head in fear. Ignoring the situation, old Mr. Su turned to his grandson, Su Ju, and said, "Lu Mion's going to your school soon. Look after her, okay?" Su Ju looked annoyed, but before he could say anything, his father interrupted with a sigh. "You're not trying to set Su Ju up with Lu Mion, are you? That girl isn't a good match for our Ju. Her sister, Lu Xinwan, would be much better." Old Mr. Su shot him a glare. "Nonsense. It's our family that doesn't deserve Lu Mion." Su Ju grumbled, but didn't take it seriously. Meanwhile, Lu Mion left the Su family estate, leisurely making her way back. Xiao Qimor drove up beside her and rolled down the window. "Miss Lu, need a ride?" Without even looking up, Lu Mion lazily replied, "No need." Xiao Qimor chuckled. This girl is so stubborn. He drove a little ahead, then made a sudden sharp turn to block her path, opening the passenger door. "Oops, my bad. Slipped." Lu Mion didn't even react to his childish antics, not even with a punctuation mark. Since he was being so persistent, Lu Mion figured there was no need to be overly dramatic, so she just slid into the passenger seat. After buckling her seatbelt, she smirked mischievously. "Are you sure it's safe riding in your car?" Xiao Qimor seemed to be in a good mood. "Relax, I'm a smooth driver." Lu Mion lazily pulled out her phone and started messing with it. "All right then, I'll leave it to you, driver Xiao. Xiao Qimor glanced at her and casually asked, the hitmen in the alley weren't exactly amateurs. How do you handle it? A flicker of caution flashed in Lu Mion's eyes. Just picked up a bit of self-defense. Any problem with that? Xiao Qimor nodded in understanding. He knew that when she was kidnapped years ago, she was only 17, and surviving for 2 years under the brutal hands of those criminals was unimaginable to most. After a moment of silence, he softly asked, "Can you tell me what you went through?" Surprisingly, Xiao Qimor, who rarely offered anyone a ride home, found that the girl had fallen asleep. She seemed to be sleeping soundly. Was the music too boring, or was his conversation that dull? Amused and slightly frustrated, Xiao Qimor adjusted the music and air conditioning without thinking. Soon, the sleek black car pulled up in front of the Lu family home. He looked over at her, wondering whether he should wake her up or carry her inside. Just as he raised his hand, before he could even touch her, she suddenly grabbed his wrist with surprising force. Startled, she opened her eyes and mumbled, "Don't touch me." Xiao Qimor chuckled to himself. What a little trickster. Unfazed, she leaned forward, moving closer. Her fluttering eyelashes caught his eye, and he couldn't help but gulp, his voice lowering as he whispered in her ear, "Does it hurt?" Lu Mion froze for a second but quickly tuned out his attempts to charm him. She released his hand, casually tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a small red mole on the cartilage. Xiao Qimor was momentarily stunned. It was as if he, the master of flirting, had just been outplayed. That tiny red mole triggered a strong urge in him, to conquer her. Lu Mion smiled triumphantly as she saw how flustered he was. "Your self-control is pretty weak," she teased before unbuckling her seatbelt and lazily getting out of the car, not even looking back. Xiao Qimor chuckled as he drove away. "Guess we'll meet again soon." As soon as Lu Mion pulled out her keys and opened the door, a rough force yanked her inside. Startled, she almost threw a punch until she realized it was her mom. Fu Man's temper flared up instantly. "Where have you been today? Did you go to the Su family to cause trouble? You just can't stand seeing your sister do well, can you?" Lu Mion let out a cold laugh. "Wow, word travels fast, huh?" Fu Man pulled out her phone and showed her a message. "Who do you think you're mocking? Nuanuan told me everything, but look at what your sister had to say. Why are you always so harsh with her?" Lu Mion glanced at the message from her dear sister. As expected, still a master at playing the victim. Since she'd never been able to measure up to Lucian Nuan growing up, Lu Mion brushed past the phone and headed upstairs. Fu Man, in a tone full of disappointment, kept scolding her. "Look at yourself, and then look at Xin Nuan. What part of you is even close to her level? Of course, I favor her. What do you have to feel sorry for? I don't expect much from you, just don't drag your sister down. She's the pride of the family. Can you at least focus on school and stop causing trouble?" Lu Mion ignored her nagging, pulled out her phone, and sent a message, "I get it now, right? Coming back was a mistake. You going to school Monday? Miss you." Fu Man saw her texting and got even angrier. "I'm still talking, and you're just going to ignore me and play on your phone." Lu Mion gave her a cold look. "In your eyes, I'll never be as good as Lucian Nuan. You think me coming back would change anything? You never wanted me back in the first place. So don't bother pretending to care, just act like I never returned." Right after, Lu Mion sent a message to her sidekick, Ling, "Buy this stock today." Ling executed the trade right away and posted the news in their group chat. The second the message dropped, the chat exploded with all kinds of praise. Suju saw the message and immediately bought $500,000 worth. Afterward, he leaned back, hands behind his head, a mysterious smile on his face. He was curious to see if this so-called stock market genius could keep it up every time. A few days later, school started again. One of his close friends came over to say hi and noticed he was still studying the stock market. Suju, watching the stock surge in value, couldn't help but grin. We could sell now and make a lot, but the boss says to wait a bit longer. I hope she doesn't let us down. Suddenly, the sound of light footsteps came from behind them. Lu Xinyuan approached with a smile. How's your grandpa doing lately, Suju? His friend stood up quickly with a teasing grin. Wow, Suju, you've got it all, success in both work and love. I'll leave you two lovebirds alone. Lu Xinyuan's face turned red. They're just making stuff up. Next time, I'll teach them a lesson if they keep talking like that. Suju seemed unfazed. They're just joking. Don't worry about it. Inwardly, Lu Xinyuan was thrilled. Did he just admit it? Suddenly, everyone started whispering. Is that the new transfer student? She looks like she walked straight out of a manga, so pretty, cool, and fierce. Lu Xinyuan turned around and saw Lu Mian walk in with a book tucked under her arm, looking effortlessly cool. Her eyebrows furrowed in annoyance. She actually showed up. She better not try to talk to me. I don't want anyone knowing I have such an embarrassing sister, and I definitely don't want her stealing the spotlight. She quickly put on a smile and spoke first. Can I help you with something? Lu Mian glanced at her dramatic expression and pointed to Suju sitting next to her. I'm here for him, not you. Lu Xinyuan felt a bit awkward for a moment. Lu Mian continued, your grandpa said he can't reach you. He asked me to tell you he'll pick you up tonight for a company event at the usual spot. Suju didn't even look up as he lazily responded. He knew Lu Mian wouldn't care about his spoiled attitude and just walked straight to a seat in the back. Lu Xinyuan, trying to act all sweet, said, your grandpa is so nice to you. I hope I'll get the chance to see him again sometime. Suju, still looking totally uninterested, replied, we'll see. Lu Mian pulled a book called The Heartbreaker from her bag and started reading when a cheerful voice suddenly chimed from above her. Lu Mian, you're back. It was Sui Yuan, her short boyish haircut making her instantly recognizable. Seeing her made Lu Mian smile, and the two happily started chatting. Lu Xinyuan sneakily glanced back, surprised to see that student being so close to Lu Mian. A trace of jealousy flashed in her eyes. Fine, don't blame me for what's coming, she thought bitterly. You are, after all, my sister's best friend. Lu Mian had only wanted to check out the newly renovated apartment across from the school, but she ended up running into two familiar faces. Yi Jingwen greeted her with a playful grin. Hey Mian, what are you doing here? Are you stalking us or something? Standing next to him, Xiao Qimor stayed silent, but Lu Mian shot him a quick glance and replied, in your dreams. Yi Jingwen, clearly embarrassed, asked, wait, does she hate me now? Xiao Qimor calmly advised him, next time, don't go around calling girls by cutesy nicknames. They won't like it. Yi Jingwen watched her walk away and muttered to himself, how do you even know if she's mad? Isn't this just how Lu Mian always is? But, unexpectedly, the three of them ended up in the same apartment building. As they walked, Yi Jingwen whispered to Xiao Qimor, do you think she really is stalking us? Just then, the elevator dinged, and a cool voice floated over, what exactly about you would be worth stalking? Yi Jingwen scoffed, why's it gotta be me? Why not us? And why am I not worth stalking? Xiao Qimor chuckled softly, and the three of them got into the elevator one after the other. Both Yi Jingwen and Lu Mian reached out to press the button for the 8th floor at the same time. They looked at each other, momentarily stunned, before Lu Mian pulled her hand back and said, you go ahead. After that, no one said a word as they quietly waited for the elevator to reach their floor. Yi Jingwen glanced around, feeling like a total third wheel. When they reached the 8th floor, Xiao Qimor was the first to step out of the elevator. He slightly turned his head toward Lu Mian and asked, wanna come hang out at my place? It was surprising to see the usually aloof Xiao Qimor invite a girl to his apartment. Yi Jingwen quickly flashed a welcoming smile, adding, yeah, Mian, come in. We're all friends here. Under their expectant gazes, Lu Mian actually started to walk in their direction. But just as the two of them were about to follow, they saw her turn in the opposite direction. Yi Jingwen quickly called after her, "Hey, Mion, it's this way." But before he could finish his sentence, they heard the sound of a door unlocking behind them. Lu Mion gave them a look that said, "Don't get ahead of yourselves," and added, "Oh, so we're neighbors, huh?" Xiao Qimor stared at her, thinking this girl was pretty interesting. Meanwhile, Yi Jingwen was left speechless by her sarcastic tone. "Hey, Qimor," Yi Jingwen said as they entered the apartment, "is the place next door really owned by the Lu family? Apartments here aren't cheap, you know. If they had this kind of money, they wouldn't have given up on Lu Mion during that kidnapping incident, right?" He lazily sprawled out on the couch and continued, "Since we're living so close now, I'll be able to see Mion all the time. Makes my job as her therapist easier." Xiao Qimor shot him an annoyed look. "Do you even have any free time? Any leads on the mystery guy yet?" Yi Jingwen groaned dramatically, "Why is he always mad at me?" So, while Xiao Qimor was taking a shower, Yi Jingwen decided to make herself useful and whipped up a delicious feast. Xiao Qimor had just gotten out of the shower when the doorbell rang. He wasn't planning to answer, but then he thought, who else would come at this time? He walked over to the door and opened it, only to find the rebellious short-haired girl leaning casually against the doorframe, staring right at him with a smirk. "What's up?" he asked. When a freshly showered, suave guy meets a straightforward, no-nonsense girl, what could happen? Xiao Qimor thought his looks might fluster her a little, but to his surprise, Lu Mion's gaze stayed clear and steady. "Hey, can I borrow a pair of chopsticks?" Xiao Qimor thought he must have misheard her, but when he saw Lu Mion's expression remain totally neutral, he calmed himself down. "Guess she's really not into me at all," he thought, before casually turning and walking into the apartment. "Hold on, why don't you come in and sit for a bit?" he offered. But Lu Mion stayed put at the door, glancing around at his place, which was decked out in cool black, white, and grey tones. The vibe felt a bit cold and unsettling. A moment later, Xiao Qimor came back with a pair of wooden chopsticks. Lu Mion thanked him sincerely and was just about to take them, but Xiao Qimor held onto the chopsticks tightly, locking eyes with her. Out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you know where the mystery person is?" Lu Mion blinked, a bit confused. "What are you talking about?" Xiao Qimor stepped closer and whispered in her ear, "The person who saved you, the one with the code name 13. Lu Mion gently pushed him back with a single finger. "What does this mystery person have to do with me?" she said, before turning around and heading back to her apartment. Xiao Qimor muttered under his breath, "What a little heartless thing." Still, her face gave away nothing. Could she really not know anything about the mystery person's whereabouts? Would that person ever get in touch with her again? Just then, Yi Jingwen came barreling out of the kitchen. "Qimor, we only have 2 pairs of chopsticks, and you just gave one to Lu Mion. How are we supposed to eat?" Xiao Qimor gave him a quick glance, then calmly sat back down and picked up the last pair of chopsticks for himself, digging into the meal without a care. Yi Jingwen stared at him in disbelief. "Wow, you're such a jerk." He watched Xiao Qimor neatly lined up all the fish bones he picked out, shaking his head. Total control freak, as usual, he thought, resting his chin on his hands. "So, Qimor, what's our plan when it comes to Lu Mion?" Xiao Qimor, still eating slowly, asked, "Have you ever thought about why she asked me to borrow a pair of chopsticks?" Yi Jingwen immediately perked up. "Wait, are you saying chopsticks are like some kind of symbol of forever together, or something?" Was she trying to drop a hint? Xiao Qimor raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his expression. "That's an interesting theory," he said. "Makes me want to investigate her more. Who would have thought a sweet, innocent girl could have such a dark side?" Meanwhile, Sui Yuan, who seemed pretty close with Lu Mion, was tricked by Lucian Yuan, who said that the teacher wanted to meet her, pushing her right into the clutches of some thugs. The other students didn't even notice Sui Yuan was missing until they were arranging their desks. As soon as Lu Mion entered the classroom, she sensed something was off. Without wasting a second, she pulled out her phone and tapped on it a few times. What looked like an ordinary phone instantly transformed into a tiny computer. Her fingers flew across the projected keyboard. Eyes glued to the screen, Lu Mion didn't blink. Lu Xinyuan casually walked by, curious about what she was doing with such a high-tech gadget. 3 minutes later, the system tracked Sui Yuan to Yongxing Bar. She was helplessly kneeling on the ground, surrounded by a bunch of thugs. Without a second thought, Lu Mion grabbed her phone and sprinted out the door. At the same time, Yi Jingwen, sipping his tea, suddenly jolted up, his eyes wide. Excitedly, he woke up Xiao Qimo, who was napping on the couch. "I just picked up a signal from the mysterious person, code name 13. It was faint, but it definitely flashed." Xiao Qimo narrowed his eyes. "Where?" Yi Jingwen looked at him with a weird expression. "It's coming from your neighborhood." Xiao Qimo stood up thoughtfully, grabbed his coat, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Let's go." By now, Lu Mion was speeding toward Yongxing Bar on her sleek black motorcycle. She found Sui Yuan in a dark alley near the bar. The moment Lu Mion took off her helmet, her eyes narrowed. The thugs, who had been planning something shady, perked up when they saw her. "Whoa, look at this chick. Guess we're in for a cute little Lolita show today." Lu Mion casually tossed her helmet, and it landed perfectly on her bike's side mirror. Step by step, she walked toward Sui Yuan, who was already terrified, collapsed on the ground. Sui Yuan stared at her like she was a goddess descending from the sky. Lu Mion crouched down, wiped the tears from her face, and gently reassured her, "Don't be afraid." Yi Jingwen was driving Xiao Qimo towards his place when he suddenly noticed Lu Mion in a nearby alley, squaring off with a group of thugs. Shocked, he blurted out, "Isn't that Lu Mion? What's she doing there?" From the back seat, Xiao Qimo's voice was cold and firm, "Stop the car." Yi Jingwen hesitated. "Weren't we supposed to be looking for that mysterious person? Why are we stopping for Lu Mion?" Xiao Qimo's irritation was clear. "Do you need me to ask you again?" Yi Jingwen quickly killed the engine, and as they got out, they saw Lu Mion calmly pulled out some earbuds, put them on Sui Yuan, and helped her stand. The thugs, completely unaware of the danger they were in, laughed mockingly. "What, a little girl wants to fight us? Come on, let's see what you've got." Before they could finish their sentence, Lu Mion moved, one kick to the head, another to the groin, and a final one to the gut. The thug screams echoed through the alley. Lu Mion muttered under her breath, "Pathetic." She took off her jacket, draped it over Sui Yuan, and guided her out of the alley. As they stepped out, they spotted Xiao Qimo and Yi Jingwen standing at the entrance. Casually, as if it were nothing, Lu Mion nodded in greeting, having just taken down 3 kidnappers like it was no big deal. Yi Jingwen's legs trembled. "Were you seriously the one who just wiped the floor with those thugs? You act like nothing happened." Xiao Qimo spoke softly, "Your friend is hurt. I've got some medicine at my place, you should take him there." Lu Mion nodded, helping Sui Yuan into his car. Xiao Qimo, meanwhile, couldn't take his eyes off her. Not realizing the tension, Yi Jingwen whispered, "Is he her boyfriend?" Xiao Qimo shot him a cold glance, making him dive back into the driver's seat. Lu Mion casually tossed her helmet to Xiao Qimo. "I'm staying with her. You can take my bike, just ride it back for me." Yi Jingwen floored the gas pedal, speeding off, excited. "I never thought I'd see the day someone bossed around Lord Qimo." Xiao Qimo held the helmet, his lips curling into a slight smile. "She's getting more interesting by the day." After they settled Sui Yuan in the apartment, Yi Jingwen suddenly got a mischievous idea. "You were the one who brought him here, why don't you bandage up our little buddy's wounds?" Xiao Qimo snorted and turned to leave. "You do it. It's not like you can't. And while you're at it, maybe give him a little therapy session." Yi Jingwen rolled his eyes. "I haven't been a surgeon in years, okay?" Still, he took the time to carefully bandage Sui Yuan's hand and asked if she had any other injuries. Sui Yuan shook her head. Yi Jingwen poured her a glass of water and told her to rest up, then excitedly hurried over to Xiao Qimo. He whispered, "Hey, Qimo, she's actually a girl. Xiao Chemo's eyes lit up immediately. Make sure you take good care of her. I'm going to check on Lu Mion. At this moment, Lu Mion was on a call in the hallway. She'd just found out that the school's surveillance footage was mysteriously missing, and she realized this situation might not be so simple. When Xiao Chimo stepped out, she had just hung up. Their eyes met, and Lu Mion muttered a quick thanks, sounding a bit irritated. Xiao Chimo gave her a once-over, noticing her hands fumbling in her pockets as if searching for something. With a slight smile, he pulled out a sealed pack of cigarettes and a lighter. Lu Mion looked at him, surprised, and Xiao Chimo shrugged. I haven't smoked in a long time, but I like to be prepared. Lu Mion paused for a moment, but only took the lighter. I promised someone I'd quit, she said. Then, leaning lazily against the wall, she stared at the tiny flame from the lighter and took in the scent of the lighter fluid, almost as if savoring it. Xiao Chimo's throat bobbed slightly, and he gently reminded her, lighter fluid contains butane, it's not good for you. Lu Mion chuckled, no, it's not, but it can numb your nerves and keep you calm. Xiao Chimo detected some complexity in her tone and asked, do you want to go check on that girl for a bit? Lu Mion casually snapped the lighter shut and tossed it to Xiao Chimo. I'm going inside to check on Sui Yuan, she said as Xiao Chimo's eyes glinted behind his gold-rimmed glasses, a hint of interest flashing in his deep gaze. Seeing how swift and efficient Lu Mion was in action sparked Xiao Chimo's curiosity like never before. For the first time, he felt the desire to really understand a girl and even missed his chance to find number 13 because of it. After making sure Sui Yuan was okay with her minor injuries, Lu Mion hooked a chair over with her foot and sat down. Don't worry, she said, those guys are already in police custody. Can you tell me what really happened at school? Sui Yuan kept her head down, her eyes darting away. I just wanted to go for a walk, but then they cornered me and dragged me to a bar, she muttered, thinking to herself. Should she tell Mion that it was her sister behind all this? Would that put Mion in a tough spot? Never mind, better to keep quiet for now. Lu Mion instantly saw through her hesitation and knew she wasn't telling the whole truth. But instead of calling her out, she just said, don't worry about it. Next time, I'll take you to a bar myself. Sui Yuan mumbled under her breath, I'm older than you, you know. You're actually the youngest one among us. Lu Mion reached over and ruffled her short hair with a playful grin. I'm not that young. And if anything happens in the future, you better let me know. Next door, the apartment was ready for her. You should go rest there, Lu Mion said, getting up to leave. Sui Yuan, a bit worried, grabbed her hand. Don't get into any more fights. You could get hurt. Lu Mion, knowing Sui Yuan cared, waved it off lightly. They might, but I won't. Seeing Sui Yuan's delicate yet earnest concern made Lu Mion think she looked like a cute little curly-haired pup. Unable to resist, Lu Mion gave her a playful pat on the head and winked as she left, a mix of cool indifference and charming mischief. Sui Yuan froze for a second, and her pale face blushed bright red. Standing nearby, Xiao Chimo and Yi Jingwen watched the scene unfold and couldn't help but feel like something was a bit off. After Lu Mion left, Yi Jingwen quickly shuffled over to Sui Yuan with a gossip-filled grin. Hey, what's the deal with you and Lu Mion? Sui Yuan shyly smiled, us? We're like life and death buddies. While Lu Mion was waiting for the elevator, Xiao Chimo happened to come out of his apartment and asked if she was heading out. Lu Mion nodded, saying she was going back. Xiao Chimo knew exactly where she was going and pointed to his wristwatch, signaling for her to check the time. Lu Mion lazily glanced up, nice watch, looks expensive. And you've got a nice wrist too. She had a knack for snarky comments, and Xiao Chimo was used to it by now. He just shook his head, a little exasperated. It's 10 o'clock. I can give you a ride, he offered. Lu Mion looked at him, puzzled, trying to figure out what he meant. Xiao Chimo lifted the trash bag in his hand and said, I'm just going out to throw this away. It's on the way. Lu Mion tilted her head and then suddenly chuckled, oh, so even Mr. Xiao takes out the trash himself? She took a step closer and lightly bounced the bag in his hand. Hey, why is it empty? Caught in his little lie, Xiao Qimor was momentarily flustered. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a second, and stepped into the elevator. Hiding in the back, Yi Jingwen almost burst out laughing. I told him that excuse wouldn't work. Looks like he almost couldn't save face this time. Once in the car, Lu Mian gazed out the window, lost in the night view. Xiao Qimor, trying to break the silence, asked, "How's school going for you?" Lu Mian replied lazily, "The kids there are kinda cute." Xiao Qimor continued, "Your friend is Sui Yuan, right?" Yi Jingwen mentioned that she's in a pretty unstable situation emotionally. Seems like Kunpeng School needs to step up its game in some areas. Lu Mian chuckled softly, "I think so too. There's definitely more to Sui Yuan's kidnapping than it seems. I need to dig deeper into this." They made small talk like this until they arrived at the Lu family home. As Lu Mian got out of the car, she didn't shut the door right away. She leaned on it, looking inside. Xiao Qimor turned his head to look at her, thinking, is this girl finally catching on? Before Xiao Qimor could think any further, he heard a sincere question pop up beside him. Mr. Xiao, how much is the fare?" Xiao Qimor waved his hand dismissively. Just go, just go." He felt a bit embarrassed, thinking to himself, wow, I'm really overthinking things here. After watching Lu Mian walk into her house, he picked up his phone and called Yi Jingwen. "I think Kunpeng School needs a responsible dean of discipline. What do you think about me for the job?" Yi Jingwen was so shocked he almost dropped his phone. "What are you talking about? Miss White Lotus over here, always complaining about something." When she got home, she pretended to be worried and asked her mom, "Has sis come back yet?" Mrs. Lu looked puzzled. "No, why? Did she get into trouble again?" Lu Xinyuan hesitated before saying, "Sis didn't ask for leave this afternoon and went outside the school to find a missing classmate. I'm worried she might run into danger." Mrs. Lu immediately raised her voice. "What's it got to do with her? She's just a student, does she even have the capability?" Lu Xinyuan shook her head. "I don't know, but sis probably meant well." Mrs. Lu's temper flared up. "I think she's just trying to cause trouble. She doesn't focus on her studies, but she's all too eager for stuff like this." Then she glanced at her husband and said, "Tonight, you need to back me up. We have to teach Lu Mian a lesson. If she doesn't want to learn, fine, but she can't ruin Nuan's future. The teacher said that senior year is crucial, and parents must provide the best environment for studying. Everything should make way for the college entrance exam." Mr. Lu, still scrolling on his phone, gave a half-hearted millimeter. Lu Xinyuan smirked, hoping this time they could finally drive that bad luck charm out for good. When Lu Mian eventually strolled back home, Mrs. Lu was quick to strike first. "I need to talk to you," she said. Lu Mian shot her a cold glance. "What do you want to say?" Mrs. Lu's momentum deflated under Lu Mian's glare. "Tell me, what exactly are you planning? Getting into Kunpeng High School took a lot of effort. Your second uncle had to pull some serious strings with the Education Bureau. But why are you always skipping class and worrying everyone?" Lu Mian dropped her bag on the floor and asked bluntly, "Why do you care?" Then Mrs. Lu gritted her teeth and continued, "If you're not going to study properly, I might as well stop wasting money on you and spend it all on nurturing Nuan instead. Wouldn't that be more worthwhile? Maybe you should just drop out." Lu Xinyuan pretended to be concerned as she stepped forward to hold her mother back. "Mom, she's only 19. What will she do if she doesn't go to school? How will she manage to live?" Lu Mian let out a small chuckle and lazily walked up to them, draping an arm around each of their shoulders. "Quit the act, it's exhausting for everyone." She then picked up her bag again, headed upstairs, and laughed while walking. "Your acting is pretty good, but the script could use some work. Anyway, you don't have to say any more. I'm done with this place." She packed a few of her essential belongings and headed for the door. Mrs. Lu felt a jolt of panic in her chest and asked, "Where are you going?" Lu Mian turned back and replied coldly, just pretend I was never here, then shut the door behind her with a finality that was both firm and cold. Mrs. Lu, in a fluster, tried to chase after her, but Lu Xinyuan quickly held her back. Mom, don't be upset. Maybe sis will come back in a few days. Mrs. Lu looked furious, muttering, this ungrateful child. She's going to be the death of me. Watching Lu Mian disappear into the distance, Lu Xinyuan let out a long breath of relief, thinking, I hope you never come back. Our Lu family will finally be free of any stain. When Lu Mian reached the front gate, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Looking up, she saw Xiao Qimor leaning against his car, a slight smile in his eyes, as if he'd been waiting for her. As she walked up to him, she asked, why haven't you left yet? Xiao Qimor naturally took her bag and said, because I figured you might come out. He then opened the passenger door for her. Hop in. I'll take you home. Lu Mian hesitated, holding onto the car door. She repeated the word home in her mind. Where did she even have a home anymore? Xiao Qimor watched her efforts in the night breeze, feeling an inexplicable sense of pity. He recalled what Yi Jingwen had once said, the more carefree someone appears on the outside, the more they're hurting on the inside. After all, she was just a 19-year-old girl. Many others her age were still pampered by their parents, but here she was, standing strong and blooming on her own. He also understood why the other 4 victims from the kidnapping case years ago all ended up disappearing later. It was because, once abandoned by their families, even if they returned, they wouldn't receive love again. It's better to erase their identities and start fresh under a new name. Thinking of this, he motioned for the girl to get in the car. Lu Mian didn't say anything and got in. As the car drove back the same way, the quiet atmosphere filled the space. Xiao Qimor casually mentioned, mysterious person number 13, she's actually quite nice. Lu Mian gave him a sidelong glance, signaling him to continue. Seeing no unusual reaction from her, Xiao Qimor went on, the mysterious person not only saved you but also gave new identities to the other 4 victims. She understands human nature better than anyone. Honestly, she's one of the few people I admire. You can tell she has a kind heart. Lu Mian's expression was a bit complicated. She knew he had more to say. Sure enough, Xiao Qimor hesitated before finally saying, do you want to start over with a new identity? You don't need the mysterious person to help. I can give you a new identity, too. Lu Mian could see he wasn't joking and responded with a playful smile. And what would this new identity be? Mrs. Xiao, perhaps? Xiao Qimor glanced at her and calmly replied, that's not impossible. Lu Mian's smile brightened, and she shook her head, saying, but I'm not into long-distance relationships, a student and a working adult are worlds apart. Xiao Qimor laughed along with her and said, I can change that. When Lu Mian looked at him in confusion, he stopped talking and focused on driving. But she had a feeling he might be planning something. I heard the Dean of Discipline changed, too. Could it have something to do with the kidnapping of Sui Yuan back then? I heard Sui Yuan was found by Lu Nian, but no one really knows what happened between them. Everyone's confused, and they've been asking Su Ju, like, what's going on? Su Ju just shook his head, but his eyes landed on Sui Yuan. What's her deal with Lu Mian? And why is Lu Xinyuan treating Sui Yuan like that? With all these thoughts in his head, Su Ju walked out of the classroom. Lu Xinyuan, who had been secretly watching him, immediately followed. The class instantly started teasing, like, there goes the goddess after her man again. So lovey-dovey. Lu Xinyuan, looking all gentle and kind in front of Su Ju, asked him sweetly, where are you going? Class is about to start. Su Ju glanced back at her, his tone cool and weirdly distant as he asked, Lu Xinyuan, do you even know your sister? Hearing him talk about another girl, especially her sister, the little bit of joy she had from chasing Lu Mian away vanished. What's up with you, Su Ju? She asked. Lu Mian's always been weird. She's not close with anyone, and almost no one knows her. Besides, she's cut ties with us now, Lu Xinyuan added, shaking her head in frustration. Then why are you targeting Sui Yuan? Suju's sudden question hit her like a brick. Lucien Yuan froze, her eyes filling with tears. Suju, I don't even know what you're talking about. How could you say that about me? Suju stayed silent, his usual warmth replaced by cold indifference. Don't think I'm clueless, he said bluntly, walking away toward the school building. Meanwhile, a skinny guy, a chubby guy, and a girl who looked like she stepped out of a manga were heading toward the library. Over there's the art building, that's the admin building, and that's the back mountain, the chubby guy, Pang Hao explained as they walked. Lu Mion pointed toward the back mountain and asked curiously, "What's up with that place?" Pang Hao lowered his voice and cautiously whispered, Mion, the back mountain is off limits. We absolutely cannot go there." Lu Mion's eyes lit up with excitement, and it was obvious what she was thinking, "I'm going." Pang Hao sighed and continued explaining, "There's a pavilion on the mountain, and it's seriously creepy. People say once you go in, you start shaking, your heart races, and it feels like an invisible hand is choking you. The schools ban students from going near it, they even put up an electric fence. Word is, there's something unclean buried underneath, and every school seems to have its ghost stories. Kumping High is no exception." Lu Mion's eyes sparkled with even more excitement. "You guys head back, I'm going to check it out." Mion. You can't go there. If you do, we have to go with you." Pang Hao called out, but Lu Mion wasn't listening, she was already far ahead, waving them off as she continued toward the mountain. She soon reached the infamous, eerie pavilion, barely breaking a sweat. Slowly, she moved closer, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, as if trying to sense something in the air. This was where the kidnappers had last been spotted. The exact spot was unclear, and why they came here was a mystery. If she wanted to get to the bottom of the kidnapping, she'd have to search the whole school, leaving no suspicious detail unchecked. But before she could feel anything, footsteps echoed behind her, followed by a calm and elegant male voice. "Lu Mion, I'm here. Going in won't solve anything." Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Xiao? What are you doing at our school?" He smiled smoothly, adjusting his shirt sleeves with care. "Let me introduce myself, I'm your new Dean of Discipline, Xiao Qimo." Surprised, Lu Mion stopped in her tracks but still politely greeted him, "Hello, Teacher Xiao." "I'm not a teacher," he corrected with a faint smile. "Just the new director in charge of discipline, so you'd better behave from now on." Meanwhile, a few minutes earlier, Principal Zhong had escorted Xiao Qimo down from his office, practically sweating with respect. "Mr. Xiao, have you really made your decision?" "Please, call me Director Xiao," Xiao Qimo replied calmly. Principal Zhong was nervous. "But sir, are you sure? Someone of your status becoming a Dean of Discipline, no teaching, no lectures, no pay. How are all these big shots we've recruited so free to do this kind of work?" Principal Zhong asked hesitantly, "Mr. Xiao, aren't you going to handle the pavilion situation at the back of the mountain?" Xiao Qimo calmly pushed up his glasses. "When would it be convenient for you to start working, Director Xiao?" Principal Zhong quickly corrected himself. Xiao Qimo was about to say, "in a few days," but then his gaze caught sight of a girl not far away. She stood tall and graceful, with striking features that made her stand out in any crowd. His deep, mysterious eyes glimmered behind his gold-rimmed glasses. His low, smooth voice broke the silence. "I can start right now." Principal Zhong was confused, raising an eyebrow. Meanwhile, Lu Mion was finding their conversation harder to follow. She glanced at Xiao Qimo, feeling like his strange expression was giving her mixed signals. Shaking off the weird feeling, she decided not to overthink it. "Director Xiao, I'm heading back to class now." "Good girl," Xiao Qimo praised her softly, moving a little closer. Then, in a casual tone, he asked, "I'm not too familiar with Wu Cheng yet. Can you recommend a good place for lunch later?" Lu Mion was still confused by his vague, cryptic attitude but decided not to dwell on it. "You should be thanking me on Sui Yuan's behalf, right?" As soon as he mentioned Sui Yuan, Lu Mion's expression softened. It's just lunch, no big deal. I'll treat you. See you at the gate after class. With that, she walked away, kicking small pebbles as she left. Xiao Qimor watched her slender figure fade into the distance, then turned his gaze back to the eerie pavilion surrounded by the electric fence. His expression grew even more serious. There's definitely something strange about this place. Last time he made 11 million and now he's earned another 15 million. Suju, you're truly a genius, the future king of the finance world. This news hit the class like a bombshell, causing an uproar. Everyone rushed to surround Suju, eyes wide with excitement. Although Suju was surprised and thrilled deep down, he kept his usual calm demeanor. This is no big deal, he said coolly. Suju, let's throw a party for you at lunch. Xie Huiyang suggested, eager to celebrate. Suju, feeling generous, waved his hand and said, I should be the one treating everyone. Let's all have lunch together if you're free later. Suju announced the lunch party, saying, Who's coming? Sign up with me. Xie Huiyang, who was close with Suju, immediately volunteered to handle the details. Suju, lost in thought, stared at his phone, watching the huge sums of money roll in from his stock trades. With this second win, he figured his grandpa would finally start seeing him in a new light. Lucian Yuan couldn't believe her crush was walking straight toward her desk, with the whole class watching. Her heart pounded, and she tried to suppress the excitement bubbling inside her. Join us at lunch, Suju said casually. But just as Lucian Yuan's joy was about to peak, he added, bring Lu Mion along too. Her bright, pretty face froze. Underneath her desk, her hand clenched tightly. Trying to keep her cool, she nodded. Sure, I'll try. No one else understood their conversation, but they were curious about who this Lu Mion was. To everyone, it seemed like Lucian Yuan had only been invited as an afterthought. She accepted it with a calm face, but deep down, she was seething. She had already driven Lu Mion away, so why was she still lingering in her world, even more boldly than before? Fine, let Lu Mion come. This time, she'd make sure Lu Mion saw the huge gap between them. Immediately, Lucian Yuan sent a message to her mom, Mom, Suju made another 15 million from stocks and invited me to lunch. I won't be home. But it seems like Suju has some issues with my sister. Could you bring her over too so she can apologize to him? Her mom, Fu Man, quickly replied, Don't worry, Yuan. I'll call your sister right now. We can't let her ruin Suju's impression of you. After school, Lu Mion got into the car with Xiao Qimor, while Yi Jingwen drove. They greeted each other, gave the address, and then the car fell into awkward silence. Xiao Qimor put down his finance magazine and started some small talk. You booked the private room? Lu Mion nodded. Was it hard to get? Nah, it was easy. In the driver's seat, Yi Jingwen was silently cringing at the awkward conversation. He couldn't help but think how strange things got when the usually cool and distant Xiao Qimor interacted with this girl, Lu Mion. The whole vibe just made him want to laugh out loud. When they arrived at the MMG restaurant, Xiao Qimor got a call and went in ahead. Yi Jingwen parked the car while Lu Mion, carrying her backpack, casually strolled toward the entrance. She hadn't even made it up the steps when she heard a familiar voice call her name from behind. It was Suju. He was surprised Lu Mion actually showed up. Meanwhile, Lucian Yuan, thinking Lu Mion came to join them, felt a surge of satisfaction. She stood by Suju with her group of friends, acting like she owned the place. Hey sis, you made it. As usual, Lucian Yuan had a couple of her little followers gathered around her, already whispering about who Lu Mion was. Lucian Yuan didn't give them many details, just dropped hints that Lu Mion had offended Suju before and was here to apologize. Everyone seemed to get the hint, and their attitude toward Lu Mion grew colder. Suju, who had felt hurt before from being rejected, was in a much better mood now. He figured Lu Mion was impressed by his stock market success and felt like he'd regained his dignity as the Su family heir. Suju made a welcoming gesture, come on in, I've got a private room reserved. Lu Mion was confused, wondering why she kept running into people she really didn't want to see. As she looked around at the students glaring at her with not-so-friendly eyes, she felt a headache coming on and rubbed her temples, clearly irritated. With a smirk, she said to Lucien Yuan, "You think you're somebody, huh?" Everyone was stunned by her bluntness. Lucien Yuan stepped forward, trying to act all graceful. "Suju kindly invited you to lunch. Since you're here, you should drop the attitude." One of Lucien Yuan's friends, trying to suck up, clung to her arm and chimed in, "Yeah, our Suju made over 10 million today. He's doing you a favor by inviting you. Don't be so stuck up." Another added, "Right? You wouldn't even be here if you were really that high and mighty. This place isn't for just anyone." Lu Mion thought of Fu Man's call and instantly understood what was going on. She curled her lips into a mischievous smile and suddenly said, "I'm here to treat someone to lunch. I've got the #1 private room. How about you guys?" The #1 private room was the most exclusive, reserved only for the top VIPs. Lucien Yuan glanced at Suju, confident that with the Su family's wealth, they could definitely outshine Lu Mion this time. But Suju's face turned dark, and after struggling for a moment, he finally gritted his teeth and admitted, "We just booked a regular room." Lucien Yuan was shocked. She had planned to embarrass Lu Mion, but now it was her who felt humiliated. How could Lu Mion even afford to get into such a high-class room? And who was the VIP that invited her? "Lu Mion, you don't need to make up lies like that. It's pointless," she scoffed. But just as they were gearing up for another round of insults, a young man with striking looks and a calm demeanor walked up to Lu Mion. "What are you waiting for, Mion? Let's go, Xiao Qimor is waiting for us," he said, urging her with a friendly smile. Yi Jingwen, who had just arrived, noticed the group seemed to be giving Lu Mion a hard time. He protectively stepped in front of her and shot a cold look at Suju. "Young Master Su, do you need something from our Mion?" Under Yi Jingwen's icy gaze, Suju snapped out of his daze and, after some hesitation, said respectfully, No, nothing, Mr. Yi." He wisely stepped aside. No matter how powerful the Su family was in Cheng City, they couldn't compete with the families in Jingjing. Suppressing her frustration, Lucien Yuan whispered to Suju, "Wait, is that Yi Jingwen? Dr. Yi?" Her eyes flickered with recognition as she remembered something. Despite his gentle appearance, Yi Jingwen now seemed like a big bad wolf protecting a helpless little rabbit. As Lu Mion walked away, the students around them grew curious, eager for gossip. "So that's Lu Mion's psychiatrist? I heard she's been in therapy forever and still isn't cured. Wonder what's wrong with her?" In the #1 private room, Xiao Qimor was already seated. When Lu Mion and Yi Jingwen walked in, one after the other, Xiao Qimor immediately noticed something was off with her. "What's wrong?" Xiao Qimor asked calmly as usual. Yi Jingwen quietly observed Lu Mion, who was completely absorbed in her game, then whispered something to Xiao Qimor. Lu Mion didn't care about their little chat and didn't even look up. But soon, Xiao Qimor's cold, yet elegant, voice broke the silence. "The boss came by while you were awake, right?" He teased, his tone light but with an underlying sharpness. Yi Jingwen, happy to oblige, rushed off to handle the task. Meanwhile, Lu Mion stretched out on the couch, closing her eyes to rest. Xiao Qimor noticed the shift in her mood and straightened up a bit, smirking. "So, why are you playing on your phone in front of the director now?" Lu Mion chuckled softly without opening her eyes. "We're off school grounds, Mr. Xiao." Just as she finished, she felt a shadow over her. She lazily opened her eyes to find Xiao Qimor leaning over her, his hands on either side of the couch. His posture boxed her in, his gaze intense, almost predatory. He looked down at her, a rebellious glint in his eyes, like a wolf cornering a rabbit. Her heart skipped a beat. He was annoyingly handsome. "If we were at school, I'd have to search you and confiscate that phone." He was usually so polished and composed, but right now, he looked like he was teasing her. Despite the tension, Lu Mion didn't feel threatened, maybe because, deep down, she knew he wouldn't hurt her. She had allowed him to get this close without really realizing it. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from outside the room. Both Xiao Qimor and Lu Mian stood up, though not in sync. Their abrupt movements led to a slight collision. Lu Mian's forehead brushed against Xiao Qimor's chin. The brief, cold touch sparked something between them. They exchanged a glance, their eyes narrowing as if trying to read each other's thoughts. At that exact moment, the door swung open and Yi Jingwen walked in, accompanied by the MMG boss. He immediately noticed how awkwardly frozen Xiao Qimor and Lu Mian were, standing stiffly like they were caught red-handed. He raised an eyebrow in confusion. "Mr. Xiao, what are your orders?" he asked. Xiao Qimor, with his usual calm smile, replied, "Tell the MMG boss to cancel the reservation that the Su family made. I'll cover the cost tenfold." Meanwhile, a whole group of people, including Su Ju, stood dumbfounded outside the MMG entrance, staring at each other in confusion. Su Ju muttered under his breath, "What just happened?" Lu Xinyuan was feeling pretty embarrassed. Sure, getting kicked out wasn't the end of the world, but it was definitely awkward and humiliating. The classmates who came along, hoping to enjoy MMG's fancy food, exchanged awkward glances, not knowing what to say. But Su Ju's attention away from the MMG sign and onto Lu Xinyuan. "Why are you always going after her? First, you tried to convince me that Lu Mian has a mental illness, and now you're trying to make me hate her," he thought. By now, he didn't feel like saying anything, just thinking how they probably upset someone important this time. The thrill he got from trading stocks earlier was completely gone. In the afternoon, Xiao Qimor dropped Lu Mian back at school. He made sure she entered her classroom before leaving with Yi Jingwen. Yi Jingwen, trailing behind him, asked, "Why'd you call me over today, Qimor?" Xiao Qimor pointed towards the office building and said in his usual calm tone, "I've got a new task for you. Help me manage this role as the director." The seriousness in his voice almost made Yi Jingwen lose it. "Qimor, stop messing with me. You wanted to be the director, so why drag me into it? I barely have time to run my own clinic." "Is that so?" Xiao Qimor glanced back at him, his face as calm as ever. "What kind of therapist lets a patient outsmart them? Come on, it happened once, and that's because Mion's too smart, not because I'm bad at my job," Yi Jingwen muttered. They were now in an office, pretty quiet and peaceful, clearly set up with care by the school. Bored, Yi Jingwen opened the school forum to scroll around, and a popular post immediately caught his attention: "Beware of people with mental illnesses around you." What the heck, he cursed under his breath. Patients already had enough to deal with, and now they were being publicly shamed? This was a double hit to their dignity. Just as he was about to reply angrily to the post, the page suddenly went blank. "Qimor, did you delete that post?" he asked, but Xiao Qimor stayed silent, which was enough of an answer. Yi Jingwen leaned over the desk, getting closer to Xiao Qimor with a gossipy look on her face. "Qimor, you seem to treat Lu Mian differently. Is it just because she's the only clue to the mysterious person? First, you stand up for her, then you drive her home, and now you're quietly deleting posts. This is so not your style." As he spoke, Xiao Qimor stood up, casually swinging his suit jacket over his shoulder with a smooth motion. "I'm the director. This is all part of my job," he replied, walking out of the office. Yi Jingwen was speechless. "You seriously tricked me into leaving my therapy clinic to come to Kunpeng school? That's not what you told me." Meanwhile, the forum post about Lu Mian was like a ripple on a calm lake, stirring things up briefly before Xiao Qimor swiftly deleted it before many could see. But while you can control the internet, you can't stop the gossip. Rumors about Lu Mian having a mental illness spread quickly throughout the school, and several parents even called, demanding the school expel her, claiming she was a danger to their kids. However, at the center of all this, Lu Mian seemed unaffected. Mian, don't let this stuff get to you." That post was full of lies. "No one can handle this kind of verbal abuse," someone reassured her. Mian, they're just jealous of how beautiful you are. The The compliment made Lu Mion chuckle lightly. She stopped twirling the pen in her hand and softly tapped her cheek with it, then nodded seriously. They should be jealous. The guy across from her, Shou Hao, blushed bright red. Yeah, you're really, really beautiful, but it's all good now, the post's deleted, not many people saw it. She tried to gather herself, thinking, who's helping me? Was it really her? Lu Mion stood up, heading to the bathroom, where she secretly texted Miss Ling to ask if it was her. Miss Ling replied, saying she had no idea about the whole thing. Then who could it be? In the bathroom, a few girls huddled in small groups. When they saw Lu Mion walk in, they immediately distanced themselves, like she was some kind of contagious disease they didn't want to catch. One of the girls, clearly fed up with Lu Mion, bravely stepped forward and said, Lu Mion, stop scaring them. You're the one with issues, you shouldn't be freaking people out. Lu Mion had just put her phone away, already feeling irritated, when she noticed this girl baring her teeth and hurling sharp words at her. But before things could escalate, Lian Yujie, Lu Mion's shy friend, quickly stepped up. The girl hesitated for a second, her nerves showing, but still tried to act tough. Her friends tugged at her sleeve, whispering, careful. What if she loses it? You don't want any trouble. The school won't let her get away with it. Lu Mion looked at the group of girls. They were weak, but their mouths never stopped running. A twisted smile spread across her face, cold and fierce. She took a step closer, making them freak out and scream in panic. Honestly, if she wanted to do something, these girls wouldn't even be able to make a sound. Stop screaming already, she said, annoyed. She rubbed her temples, clearly frustrated. Her cold, piercing eyes locked onto the girls, and she spoke slowly. You know why God gave people 2 ears, 2 eyes, but only 1 mouth? The girls stared at her, confused. It's so you can listen and observe more than you talk. Lu Mion paused, her voice low and intimidating. Because people who have real power? They can do whatever they want. The girls were terrified. Completely overwhelmed by her presence, they bolted from the bathroom. As Lu Mion walked out, she spotted someone at the corner, a well-dressed man, casually leaning against the stair railing, watching her like he had expected her to appear. His eyes showed no surprise at all. The director, Xiao Qimo. Lu Mion paused, then walked over, calmly and innocently saying, I didn't do anything. Xiao Qimo paused for a moment before casually replying, it's fine. He brushed off the topic, leaving her unsure if he meant it was fine that she didn't do anything, or if it didn't matter even if she had. Why won't she tell anyone the truth? Xiao Qimo stood there quietly, silently questioning why Lu Mion, who had been the innocent victim of the 726 incident, abandoned and finally making a comeback, was still being treated so harshly by everyone around her. Lu Mion waved at Xiao Qimo and said, Mr. Xiao, class is starting. You're not going to make students late, are you? Xiao Qimo, a bit unwilling, nodded quickly and said, the post was made by someone with the phone number 6666. The owner's name is Lucian Yuan. Lu Mion paused for a moment, then turned around, her eyes clear with understanding. Oh, I see. Thanks. Xiao Qimo watched as she returned to class before heading back to his office. Yi Jingwen was waiting with a gossipy expression. So, how did it go? Checking in on Lu Mion again? He laughed to herself, thinking that Xiao Qimo was probably only Lu Mion's personal director at this point. Xiao Qimo's tone remained indifferent as he said, you've got another task to do. Hearing the assignment, Yi Jingwen's cheerful expression dropped. His baby face now looked disappointed, but he still hurried off to the school's broadcast room. When he knocked on the door, the younger girl inside straightened up, blushing. Wow, so handsome, she thought. Yi Jingwen whispered a few words to her, and she happily left the room. Lucian Yuan looked confused as Yi Jingwen approached her. Do you need something? Yi Jingwen leaned over the table, his baby face now smiling, but there was something intimidating about it. Miss Lu, I heard you've been spreading rumors about me and Lu Mion's doctor-patient relationship. He said it with a smile, but his expression was intense. Lu Xinyuan, caught off guard by his approach and knowing he was a famous psychologist, froze in place. As she realized what was happening, her eyes started to well up. "Dr. Yi, you've misunderstood. I didn't do anything," she whimpered like she was deeply wronged. Yi Jingwen chuckled to himself. For a young girl, she's a pretty good actress. Too bad she didn't go into showbiz. "Miss Lu, I've got a friend in acting. Want me to introduce you?" He rolled his eyes dramatically, sat on the desk, and said, "So, why are you hurting Lu Mion like this? What's your deal?" Lu Xinyuan looked all sad and pitiful, but Yi Jingwen's face stayed cold. "Do you really think I don't know you and Lu Mion are twins?" he asked. "You never told anyone about your relationship with her because you're ashamed of her, huh?" Lu Xinyuan bit her lip, like it was hard to say. "Yes, Lu Mion and I are twins, but you already know that. And you know she's not normal. She's even had therapy with you. If you're mad I told people about it, then you're blaming the wrong person. I didn't lie. You're her psychologist, and even you haven't given her a diagnosis. But you want to say she's fine? Look at her, does she seem normal to you?" Lu Xinyuan's confidence grew as she kept talking. Yi Jingwen wasn't having it. "As a psychologist, let me tell you, Lu Mion is completely normal. The one with issues is you. You're her sister, and you still smear her behind her back, putting her out there on the school forums for everyone to gossip about. If anyone's got a twisted mind, it's you." Lu Xinyuan bit her lip again, her face showing how hard she was thinking. "Dr. Yi, I'm not smearing her. She's brought this all on herself. My parents don't even like her. The whole family can't stand her. You still think she's normal?" Yi Jingwen snorted. "I've got to ask, does your family even know what love is? 2 years ago, during the 726 kidnapping incident, you Lu family members weren't talking. Do you really think I don't know the truth?" Lu Xinyuan froze. She stared at Yi Jingwen, her heart pounding as his cold, icy stare pierced through her. The kidnapping incident was the Lu family's biggest secret, something they'd never talk about. At that moment, the entire school heard their conversation. It had been broadcast over the PA system, and students were in shock, like they'd just stumbled onto some huge scandal. "Oh my God, not even TV dramas would dare to pull this," someone whispered. Lu Xinyuan's image as the school's sweet goddess crashed and shattered completely. In classroom 25, Fatty and Skinny were all excited, pointing at the speaker system in shock and crowding around Lu Mion. Mion, you're actually the school beauty's twin? But you two look nothing alike." Lu Mion casually twirled her pen, looking indifferent. "Why would she frame you though? I mean, she looks so innocent." "Yeah, Mion, what's the deal with the 726 kidnapping thing? Was that the huge case from 2 years ago? What's the backstory here?" Everyone was gossiping now, and their attitude towards Lu Mion started to shift. "Sure, quiet down. Let's hear what Lu Xinyuan says next." The classroom went dead silent, everyone straining to catch the gossip. The whole class was buzzing about the sisters, but Lu Mion, the one involved, felt like she was on the outside, finding the chatter annoying. She thought to herself, what is all this nonsense now? Deleting posts, getting leads, Xinyuan's manipulation, it's probably all that guy's doing. She smirked slightly, her cold gaze drifting out the window, a bit lost in thought. For once, having people care about her didn't feel too bad. Meanwhile, clueless Lu Xinyuan just kept talking, getting angrier and more worked up. Yi Jingwen sure knew a lot. Then, Lu Xinyuan spoke slowly. "Yeah, the 726 kidnapping wasn't that simple. The kidnappers took me and Lu Mion, and demanded 5 million each, 10 million in total, to save us both. No money, no rescue." She finished with a creepy tone, almost proud. "My family only scraped together 5 million, so my parents had to choose which kid to save. Heh. Lu Mion's always been a difficult child, no one could handle her. So why should she be the one our parents picked? Mom and Dad love me, so of course, they chose me first. People say your second uncle's family is rich, right? That's what Yi Jingwen doesn't get. Borrowing money wouldn't have been hard for them, would it? Dr. Yi? But you're too naive. Sure, my uncle's family is rich, but that's their money. Mom and Dad already borrowed almost 5 million from them. How could they ask for another 10 million? Even if they had saved Lu Mion, how could she ever pay back 5 million in her lifetime? Would my parents and I just stop living to pay off that debt? Yi Jingwen understood this reasoning. It wasn't just about Lu Mion not being able to repay, but also about the burden of debt crushing their whole family. So, they gave up on her. A child, that's a life, you know? He couldn't even imagine how hopeless Lu Mion must have felt hearing her own parents choose to save her sister. If they had just swallowed their pride, they could have borrowed the money. They had the ability to save her, but chose not to. That's a whole different thing than not being able to save her. The fact that Lu Mion is still so calm now? That's her being incredibly kind, don't you think? Did you ever stop to consider that maybe she really wanted to live, too? Yi Jingwen's voice cracked a little. Who doesn't want to stay alive? What did she do wrong? Lu Xinyuan let out a bitter laugh. See? She's still doing fine, isn't she? Yi Jingwen was at a loss for words. He thought that their whole family, except for Lu Mion, was just bizarre. He didn't want to say anything more to Lu Xinyuan, so he stormed out of the broadcast room, disgusted. Lu Xinyuan steadied herself, like she had just won a hard-fought battle. She flashed a triumphant smile, exhaling deeply, ready to continue her broadcast. However, a younger student walked in, giving her a weird look. Annoyed, Lu Xinyuan asked, "What's up, huh?" "Spit it out, Lu Xuejie." The younger girl hesitated, then said nervously, "Everything you just said, it got broadcasted." Lu Xinyuan's face went pale with shock. "What did you just say?" Normally, people thought it was always the younger sister bullying the older one, but now everyone heard the truth. Lu Xinyuan's sneaky little schemes were all exposed. The goddess just completely threw her own sister under the bus, and then acted like nothing happened. Ruthless. If everyone hadn't overheard her, who'd believe that the girl who'd been saying Lu Mion had a mental illness, tried to get her kicked out of school, and acted like she didn't even know her, had the nerve to do all that? If I were Lu Mion and came back alive, the first thing I'd do is get revenge on Lu Xinyuan. Lu Xinyuan stood there listening to everyone talking, and tears streamed down her face. She had never felt so humiliated, so utterly embarrassed. Looking at the classmates who usually praised her and treated her like a queen, she was filled with a mix of sadness and anger, hating every second of it. She tried to defend herself weakly. "How can you say that about me? I was kidnapped too. Wasn't I innocent in all this? It was Lu Mion who didn't want to acknowledge me. She's the one who cut ties with the family, not me." But the class wasn't buying it at all. The whole room erupted in jeers. No one believed her. Suju was sitting in the classroom, hearing all the gossip and feeling annoyed. He got up from his seat and started walking toward Lu Xinyuan. "Suju, please? Help me out here. It's really not my fault, it's all Lu Mion's doing." Lu Xinyuan pleaded desperately. But Suju didn't even glance her way as he walked past, his voice cold as he left. "I warned you, but you didn't listen." Lu Xinyuan bit her lip hard, tears of humiliation and pain rolling down her face. She was still trying to act innocent, even after everything. "Can you believe I used to think she was some kind of goddess?" one of the students muttered as the day ended and most of the students had already left. As Lu Mion looked up, about to cross the street, she spotted a man standing next to a billboard on the other side, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking graceful and elegant, like a perfect painting. His hand twitched, almost lifting on its own as he gazed at her. With a calm, soothing voice that seemed to reach her very core, he called out, "Mion, Mion, come home." Home. For the second time, Lu Mion heard that word from Xiao Qimo's lips. And for the second time, it left her completely dazed. In that moment, staring at the man on the other side of the street, it was like she was back in kindergarten again. Monday to Friday, her father used to wait by an old locust tree near the school gate, calling for her and Lucien Nuon. Mion Mion, Nuon Nuon, come home for dinner. Just like Xiao Chimor now, standing in the golden light of the sunset, calling her home. Lu Mion instinctively moved towards Xiao Chimor. But suddenly, a figure appeared in front of her, blocking her path. She stopped in her tracks, looking at the person who had appeared out of nowhere. Lu Mion, I've been waiting for you for a long time. The shy boy hurriedly shoved a big bouquet of roses into Lu Mion's arms, his eyes full of hope and nervousness. He wanted to say something but scratched his head for a long moment before dashing off without another word. Just like that, another one was gone. Xiao Chimor mentally noted this scene as he watched the girl across the street, clutching the flowers and walking toward him. This wasn't exactly how he had imagined things playing out. He was going to say something but noticed how pale her small face was, concern slipped out instead. Why are you here? Did you come to pick me up after school? She asked. Her teacher sure cares a lot about his students, but she still had that carefree, I don't take life too seriously attitude. Xiao Chimor actually wanted to ask about her health, but he didn't want to come on too strong. After all, they were both headed in the same direction. As they walked, Xiao Chimor's gaze briefly shifted to the flowers she was holding. Isn't that heavy? Are you going to take it home? Where does a high school student even get the money for such a huge bouquet of roses? Must be using their parents' hard-earned cash. These kids, already learning how to woo girls with flowers. Clearly a future Casanova. As he was thinking about all this, the man suddenly sneezed. He fumbled for a white handkerchief, a little confused as he rubbed his nose. Lu Mion frowned at him, then he sneezed again, twice in a row. Even when sneezing, Xiao Chimor's natural good looks made the gesture seem graceful and poised. He elegantly covered his mouth and nose with the handkerchief, his eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses showing a hint of apology. I think I'm allergic to pollen, he admitted. Without a second thought, Lu Mion tossed the roses into the nearest trash can. Better now? She asked. Xiao Chimor raised an eyebrow, a little surprised but relieved. Yeah, much better. Just as they approached the elevator, Lu Mion adjusted her backpack straps and walked slowly toward him. Even though her face was pale, the light in her eyes shone brighter than ever. Xiao Chimor was caught off guard for a moment, thinking again, in all my life, I never thought a girl would pin me against a wall like that. At this moment, Xiao Chimor's heart skipped a beat. His body tensed up as Lu Mion leaned closer, her long lashes seeming to magnify her flawless, porcelain-like skin. He couldn't help but feel conflicted as he caught a glimpse of the emotions hidden in her clear eyes. What was she trying to say? In just a few seconds, Xiao Chimor's emotions went through a whirlwind, but his self-control was impeccable, showing no signs of his inner turmoil. The only thing giving him away was his tense body, reminding him that something was off. Sensing the tension, Lu Mion let out a light chuckle, dropping her usual carefree attitude. Her voice, now a bit mocking, took on a serious, almost devilish tone. Move over. I need to press the elevator button. Xiao Chimor's first reaction was to glance behind him, and sure enough, he was blocking the button. Trying to maintain his composure, he quickly pressed the button, forcing a smile. As the elevator doors opened with a ding, he stepped in first, thinking he had dodged the awkward situation. But just as he felt relieved, Lu Mion's relaxed voice floated over from behind him. Oh, by the way, Director Xiao, you didn't need to throw those roses out. They were just buds, no pollen. He mentally cursed her. Why did she try to act romantic with me? Xiao Chimor's graceful face twisted slightly in frustration as he silently cursed, calling her a little brat. Without warning, he reached out and pulled Lu Mion into the elevator. Caught off guard, Lu Mion, usually quick to react, found herself awkwardly pressed against him. Xiao Chimor took advantage of the moment, turning around to trap her against the elevator wall. Surprisingly, Lu Mion stayed unusually still, only slightly bending her knees, standing there without her usual stance. Xiao Qimor sighed, looking down at her pale face, feeling helpless. All right, I surrender. I just wanted to tell you that everything that happened at school today was my doing. As the director, it's my job to be responsible for the students. I posted the anonymous note with the intention of guiding you and also clearing your name. Lu Mian looked up at him, her expression showing clear doubt, like she didn't really believe what he just said. As for the last part, she pressed her lips together but didn't say anything. When the elevator reached the 8th floor, she calmly brushed Xiao Qimor's arm aside and, without looking at him, walked straight to her apartment door. Xiao Qimor followed her out, tilting his head slightly as he asked, "Want to hang out at my place?" "No thanks, my bed's way more comfortable than your couch." Her custom-made bed had already been delivered. Lu Mian couldn't quite figure out Xiao Qimor's strange, complicated emotions, but she didn't bother thinking about it. She just wanted to lie down. Right now, all she needed was to lie down. After scanning her fingerprint to unlock the door, her body, which had been barely holding up, finally relaxed. She collapsed onto the soft, comfy bed, every part of her aching. Glancing at the records on her smartwatch, she sighed. Of course. It was that time of the month again. Curled up under the blankets, she quickly got a message from Miss Ling. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "It's that time again, who?" It was followed by a mushroom emoji representing menstrual pain. "Yep, the curse of the month," she replied. "You wanna come over?" "No way," Ling texted back. "I'm staying far away, Xiao's family lives next door, remember? We can't risk running into them." After a long pause, Ling sent another message. "Hey, you know, my family always says that if you have a kid, the pain will stop. Wanna give that a try? Get lost." Her fingers trembled slightly as she hit send, then she tossed her phone into the blankets. Her period pain was excruciating, the kind that felt like she was dying. It wasn't something she was born with, but a side effect of the kidnapping incident, an injury that left her with this monthly torment. Every month, it felt like her body was being torn apart, pieced back together, only to be torn apart again. She had survived that ordeal, but she would always have to pay the price. Maybe for the rest of her life, she'd have to endure this agony. As Lu Mian was thinking about all this, she heard a knock at the door. She had already forced herself to stand up as if nothing had happened. It was as though the person who had been in unbearable pain just moments ago wasn't her. "What's up?" she asked, pretending everything was fine. Lu Mian stood quietly by the door, arms crossed. Xiao Qimor made a sarcastic comment to himself. "Guess this is the day I get the cold shoulder." He raised the health food he brought and added, "Looks like my food's here, just needs my chopsticks." Honestly, the guy fit the phrase "wolf in sheep's clothing" perfectly. On the surface, he seemed polite and well-mannered, but deep down, he was scheming and shameless. She watched as he placed the food on the table and, without asking, went to the kitchen, grabbed the chopsticks he had lent her, and carefully set them on the table. Lu Mian just stared at his back, not stopping him, but soon she heard his slow, heavy voice from behind her. "Lu Mian, if it hurts that much, stop pretending you're fine." Her heart jolted for a moment. The next thing she knew, Xiao Qimor was at her side, gently placing his hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the bedroom. The paleness of her face had already given away how uncomfortable she was. His excuse for bringing food was really just to check up on her. He could tell she was in pain, but still trying to fake being okay. What a little liar. Feeling conflicted, Lu Mian let him help her back to the comfortable bed. Hugging the blanket, she mumbled, "Don't think you know me that well." Then he suggested, "How about some brown sugar water?" Lu Mian paused, surprised that he even knew about that remedy. Her voice got even quieter. Xiao Qimor brought her a cup of brown sugar water and held it to her lips, gently insisting she drink. The whole time, he kept a respectful distance, taking care of her without overstepping. Maybe it was because of his attention to detail, but she started feeling like the pain wasn't as bad as before. Was it just her imagination? She felt a little dazed. Suddenly, the sound of her phone vibrating snapped her out of it. Lu Mion tried to reach for her phone that was lying by the bed, but before she could grab it, Xiao Qimor had already picked it up. She narrowed her eyes at him. Xiao Qimor glanced at the phone screen and raised an eyebrow. "Looks like it's your family calling." Lu Mion, feeling weak, let her arm drop, and her face showed clear frustration. "Just hang up," she muttered, but before she could finish, she was stunned to see Xiao Qimor answer the call. From the other end of the line, a voice almost screamed through the speaker. Even though it was just a phone call, the intensity of the emotions could be felt. "Lu Mion, what did you do to your sister? Are you trying to ruin her life? I knew it. I knew you still hate us and wouldn't let us off so easily." The woman's voice was filled with pain, as though she'd been deeply hurt. "The kidnapping incident happened 2 years ago. Why are you still bringing it up? Why are you using people's sympathy to attack your sister? What does she have to do with it? She's such a good, kind girl. What did she ever do to deserve this?" After her outburst, there was an awkward silence on the other end. The woman, realizing how quiet it had gotten, yelled again, "Lu Mion, answer me!" But Lu Mion didn't just want to stay silent, she wanted to throw her phone across the room. What did her sister's problems have to do with her, anyway? Her frustration was written all over her face, and Xiao Qimor could see it too. Taking the phone to his ear, Xiao Qimor's voice was calm and cold. "Hello, this is Mr. Xiao, the director at Kunpeng High School." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Oh, I'm sorry, teacher. Why do you have Lu Mion's phone?" The woman, clearly embarrassed, quickly switched to a more respectful tone. She was used to talking like this to Lu Mion, but now that a school authority was listening, she realized how inappropriate her outburst was. She didn't want to make things worse for her precious daughter. Hurriedly, she tried to explain. "Sorry, teacher. I didn't realize it was you. Did you confiscate her phone for using it during class?" Xiao Qimor gave a nonchalant hum, ignoring Lu Mion's confused expression as he casually stuffed his hands in his pockets and headed toward the living room. "That can't be right, Lu Mion has been behaving very well." Xiao Qimor had no intention of dragging this out, crossing his legs as a shadow of cunningness flashed in his eyes. "About Lu Xinyuan, I actually wanted to discuss something with you," he said. Fu Man, who had initially been full of anger, was now much calmer and spoke humbly. "Teacher, could there be some kind of misunderstanding? How about this, I'll treat you to a meal sometime so we can clear things up." Fu Man's tone was incredibly respectful, almost ingratiating. Xiao Qimor glanced lazily toward the bedroom, his voice icily replying, "Absolutely. And in the future, please address any issues with me directly, and don't bother my students." After hanging up, he turned to Lu Mion and said, "I've taken care of it. The Lu family won't bother you for now. Just rest." If Lu Mion hadn't misheard, his tone almost sounded like he was fishing for some praise. She raised an eyebrow slightly, the playful smirk that usually hung at the corner of her lips twitching a little. "Thank you, Director Xiao," she said, sincerely. Clearly satisfied, Xiao Qimor was about to sit down, but paused when he heard her calm voice once more, "Take care. I won't see you out." His movement froze for just a second before he smoothly brushed off an imaginary wrinkle on his pants and stood back up. "Rest well," Xiao Qimor said as he turned to leave. As he passed through the dining room, he glanced at the 2 pairs of chopsticks on the table, and a helpless smile tugged at his lips. "The pair of chopsticks she borrowed from him the other day is here too." The next day, Lu Mion showed up at school like nothing had happened. She acted as she always did, cool and distant toward her classmates, with her usual careless attitude toward those she knew well. "Hey, Mion, wanna copy my answers? They're collecting the test today," Yuan Hao eagerly offered, placing his fully completed test paper proudly in front of her. Lu Mion glanced at it lazily, then smirked, "Nah, I'm not about to copy a test that only got 12 points. Both of them froze at the same time, blurting out, "How do you know the test scored 12 points, main?" Lu Mion twirled her pen indifferently, just a wild guess. Right then, Lu Xinyuan walked over and said to Lu Mion, the monthly exam and the physics competition are coming up soon. I hope you'll still be this relaxed then. Lu Mion glanced at her, feeling puzzled. What did her monthly exam and the physics competition have to do with her? But she didn't bother getting into it with Lu Xinyuan. She just replied casually, whatever. Lu Xinyuan was fuming inside, barely keeping up her composed appearance. Deep down, she made a firm resolution: she had to get first place in the competition. She wanted to prove to everyone that she was better than Lu Mion and more worthy of being saved. Just then, Lu Mion's phone buzzed with a message from Sui Yuan. Mion, join the physics competition, do it for me. I just want to see you come in first. Lu Mion couldn't help but sigh as she stared at the text, almost imagining Sui Yuan grinning mischievously at her. She had no way of saying no to her. On the podium, the teacher shouted, Yuan Hao, you and Guo Zihao got identical 12 points. Do you think the teacher's dumb and wouldn't notice you copied? If I catch you two copying again, don't bother coming to my physics class. The two stared at the bright red 12 on their papers, stunned. So, how did Main guess right? Lu Mion, come to my office. She rubbed her temples, thinking, does Mr. Ding have nothing better to do than hover over me? Casually, she slid her phone into her pocket and shoved her hands in there too, slouching as she headed toward the office. The monthly exam is tomorrow. Should I mark a few key points for you? Lu Mion felt conflicted, lazily tapping her foot in circles on the ground. Calmly, yet with a hint of indifference, she said, no need, Mr. Ding. Her words caught in her throat as a few more teachers entered the office, forcing her to swallow the rest of what she wanted to say. Mr. Ding, your computer's connected to the printer, right? Could you help us print out the admission tickets for the physics competition? Before Mr. Ding could respond, Lu Mion interrupted with a calm voice, Mr. Ding, can I borrow your computer for a moment? Hold on, let me print these tickets first, Mr. Ding replied while working on the computer. Mr. Ding, I've got a quick question, Lu Mion insisted. What's the question? Mr. Ding asked, glancing at her while still typing. It's about this physics problem, Lu Mion said as she quickly scribbled something on a piece of paper and slid it over. Mr. Ding was only half paying attention at first, but as soon as he saw the problem, his eyes lit up. Being a physics teacher, he was naturally intrigued by the challenge. You can use the computer now, he said, pushing it toward her while he focused on the problem. Soon, a group of physics teachers gathered around Mr. Ding, some grabbing pens, others scribbling calculations. But none of the 5 or 6 teachers could solve it. It was a tricky one. Just as Lu Mion finished up on the computer, she casually mentioned, oh, by the way, I've signed up for the physics competition too. Could you print my admission ticket as well? Lu Xinyuan stared at Lu Mion in disbelief. Did she seriously think she could compete in the physics competition without embarrassing herself? Lu Xinyuan was certain that Lu Mion was setting herself up for failure, and once the results came out, it was going to be humiliating. Meanwhile, Su Ju, sitting a few seats away, couldn't stop glancing at Lu Mion. Ever since she'd shown up, he couldn't get her out of his head. The more he observed her, the more baffled he became. Why was she even here at the competition? His grandpa had once said their family wasn't worthy of someone like her. What did that even mean? Lost in thought, Su Ju found it hard to focus on the exam. Before long, time flew by, and that familiar slim, tall figure had already made her way to the front to turn in her paper. The invigilator, unsure, glanced at the time to double-check. There were still 2 hours left before the exam ended, but Lu Mion calmly placed her paper on the desk. Without waiting for the invigilator to urge her to stay, she casually stuffed one hand in her uniform pocket, the other gripping a pen, and strolled out of the room like she didn't have a care in the world. Handing in the paper after just 1 hour? For sure, people were going to think she wasn't serious. But soon after, another student left their seat and handed in their exam early too. The invigilator was a bit puzzled as he watched the tall guy, who stood about 6 feet, leave. He picked up the 2 exams that had just been turned in. One was barely half done, while the other was completely filled out. Shaking his head, he sighed. Lu Xinyuan witnessed Lu Mian turn in her paper and then watched Su Ju rush out after her. She was gripping her scratch paper so tightly that it was starting to tear. It made sense that Lu Mian would turn her exam in early, she probably couldn't answer the questions anyway. But Su Ju following her out? That felt like a betrayal. As she tried to write, nothing on the exam made sense anymore. Su Ju caught up with Lu Mian after chasing her down the hall. "Why did you leave the competition?" he asked. Lu Mian barely glanced at him, clearly annoyed. Her expression said it all, "Leave me alone." Feeling awkward but determined, Su Ju didn't give up. "I heard you moved out of your house. You're still in school and don't have any income. Are you short on money? I've got some if you need it." Lu Mian narrowed her eyes at him, confused. "I'm not broke. Thanks, though." Su Ju instinctively reached out to grab her, but the moment he did, he was met with her cold, piercing glare. Her lips curled into a dangerous smile, half playful, half menacing. "Let go. I don't have time for this," she said. Su Ju wasn't ready to give up and continued to follow her, calling her name as he chased her. But just as he was about to catch up, a tall, authoritative man stepped in, blocking his path at the crosswalk. The man's presence alone seemed to dwarf Su Ju's confidence. "Good afternoon, Director Xiao," Su Ju greeted nervously, his voice barely above a whisper. Even though the school director wasn't known to be strict, Su Ju felt an odd sense of fear. Something in his gut told him this was not someone to mess with. Despite that, his eyes still anxiously followed Lu Mian as she walked away. Xiao Qimor looked at him sternly. "Other people are taking exams or attending classes. Do you really think this commotion is appropriate?" Xiao Qimor's stern, standard school director tone didn't feel out of place at all. Su Ju lowered his head, saying, "I understand my mistake, Director Xiao." "Go back to your classroom," Xiao Qimor ordered. Su Ju hesitated for a moment, reluctant to leave after finally getting the chance to speak with Lu Mian alone. Xiao Qimor raised an eyebrow. "Do you need me to escort you back?" With a heavy sigh, Su Ju reluctantly returned to class, but not without casting one last glance in Lu Mian's direction before leaving. Meanwhile, at a bar in the north side of town, Lu Mian had changed out of her school uniform. Now wearing black pants and a short-sleeve shirt, she sat calmly at the bar, ordering just a glass of ice water. When Xiao Qimor came to the private room on the second floor from downstairs, his eyes immediately landed on her. The bar was noisy and full of life, but she seemed to be in her own world, blocking out everything around her. A girl like her in a place like this? Definitely not safe. Especially one who stands out so much, and he knew she wasn't here just for a drink. "Ice water? What is that?" he muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose as frustration welled up. Without another word, he walked straight toward her. "Hey, Shiji! The girls upstairs are waiting for you in the game room," someone called out to Xiao Qimor, referring to him by his nickname. "Not now," Xiao Qimor responded coldly. In just a few steps, he was standing next to Lu Mian. She leaned against the counter, her posture cool and composed. Without asking, Xiao Qimor snatched the glass from her hand. "Your stomach doesn't hurt anymore, huh?" Lu Mian, startled, looked up and saw it was Xiao Qimor. His expression was hard to read. "Everywhere I go, you seem to show up," she thought. This heartless little brat. Just a few days ago, he had gone out of his way to make sure she drank some rare, nourishing medicine in warm water for her stomach. And now? Here she was, downing ice water in a bar. No wonder he was so annoyed. She didn't even try to soften her voice. "Yeah, my stomach's fine." Xiao Qimor looked her over. "Why are you in a bar?" "To kill time," she replied, completely unfazed. Xiao Qimor didn't question her further. With a slight nod, he gestured toward the second floor. "There's a private room upstairs. It's quieter. I'll take you up there to relax." Lu Mian couldn't help but think, why does this guy love to meddle in other people's business so much? Xiao Qimor pushed open the door to the private room at the end of the hallway, motioning for Lu Mian to enter first like a true gentleman. Yi Jingwen was laughing and joking with a group of people when he saw Lu Mian walk in. He made a sound of surprise and then, with a mischievous grin, leaned over to Xiao Qimor. "Shi, weren't you going to handle your personal businesses? Why'd you come back with someone?" Yi Jingwen, clearly intrigued by this unexpected turn, was already gearing up for some gossip, his curiosity practically burning. Xiao Qimor ignored him and waved over a server. "Get her a hot milk." He turned to Lu Mian, saying, "Kids should drink kids' drinks." Lu Mian sighed, licking her lips in mild frustration. The hot milk was soon placed in front of her, and with no other choice, she held it in her hands. Since she didn't know how to play cards, she just sat quietly behind Xiao Qimor. She swung her legs lazily, sipping the milk in small sips like a model student. Xiao Qimor seemed pleased with this sight and felt like everything was going just fine. After all, this was just a casual card game for fun. Suddenly, one of the strangers with a scruffy beard glanced at Lu Mian and blurted out, "Why don't we let the little miss shuffle the cards?" Surprised by being called out, Lu Mian straightened up and seriously responded, "I don't know how to shuffle cards." The scruffy guy grinned, even more satisfied. "That's exactly what we want, someone who doesn't know how. Adds a bit of fun, right? Who knows, maybe it'll spice things up." Xiao Qimor calmly placed a card on the table, his long fingers pressing down on it. "She said she doesn't know how," his deep voice carrying a hint of authority. The guy didn't seem too discouraged and laughed, suggesting, "How about this, if you guys win, you can ask me for one favor. If we win, I get to ask you guys for one. Deal?" Xiao Qimor and Yi Jingwen exchanged a quick glance. They had been keeping an eye on this guy for a while, hoping to get some info from him, but as soon as it involved Lu Mian, that idea was quickly dropped. Still waiting for an answer, the scruffy guy watched as Lu Mian set her cute pink milk cup aside and stood up, a faint, mischievous smile on her face. "All right." The scruffy guy nodded, satisfied with her response. Lu Mian furrowed her brows and said, "I'll just shuffle casually, then." She glanced at the scruffy guy, a sly smile spreading across her face. As she opened a brand new deck of cards, Lu Mian took them and began to shuffle, though her movements were a bit clumsy. Still, it was captivating to watch. Her fingers were long and elegant, with short, neat, light pink nails that looked clean and natural. The way the cards passed through her hands made it seem like watching her shuffle was a treat in itself. The scruffy guy's eyes lit up with excitement. He grinned like an old fox and said, "Little miss, you're not gonna get far shuffling like that. Just put them on the table and let me show you how it's done." Lu Mian gave him a cold, piercing look, her gaze filled with a fleeting but sharp hint of sarcasm. Ignoring him, she shuffled a few more times before neatly placing the deck in the center of the table, saying, "All right, let's keep going." The scruffy guy's follower chimed in, flattering him, "With a little miss shuffling, your luck's bound to get better, boss. You're gonna win big tonight." The scruffy guy eagerly reached for the first card, fingers trembling with anticipation. He picked it up and frowned at the sight of a four of hearts, clearly disappointed. When it was Xiao Qimor's turn, he casually drew the highest-ranking card, the Joker. Surprised, he leaned back slightly and muttered, "Nice shuffle." Meanwhile, Lu Mian stood next to him, drinking milk and barely paying attention. She finally responded with a lazy, uninterested, "Yeah, whatever." Xiao Qimor, staring at the unbeatable Joker in his hand, fell silent, the card so good he almost wanted to reveal it right away. Across the table, Yi Jingwen was sitting confidently, already looking like a winner. On the other hand, the scruffy guy's face turned as dark as a storm cloud, clearly on the verge of throwing his cards in frustration. Lu Mian wasn't interested in their card game's rules. After a quick 2-minute round, she saw Xiao Qimor calmly play her last card and declare, "We win." The scruffy guy and his buddy looked defeated. "No way, that was brutal. We had such a terrible hand. Little miss, can you shuffle for us again?" The scruffy guy wasn't quite ready to give up. Lu Mian lazily glanced up and said, "How about you stick to the deal first?" Xiao Qimor and Yi Jingwen also quietly watched her, waiting for what she'd say next. With a wave of his hand, the scruffy guy acted all carefree. "Fine, you win. Tell me what you want. As long as it's within my power, I'll do it." Yi Jingwen, catching a signal from Xiao Qimor, winked at him, and he spoke up. "Hey, Boss Huang, we don't want much. We just want to know, where'd you get that flashy gold chain around your neck? It's pretty nice." A simple question, but the scruffy guy's face immediately tensed up. He'd kept that chain hidden under his shirt, not many had seen it. Now that someone mentioned it out of the blue, it made him uneasy, his eyes darted around. Lu Mian's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. "What's the big deal? Is that chain not yours? Or are you just embarrassed about a handsome boy asking?" The scruffy guy got flustered. "Little miss, don't misunderstand me. I'm a legit businessman. I don't even know where I got this chain, honestly. I found it in the hallway of my hotel, no one claimed it, so I just kept it. If someone asks for it, I'll give it back. I didn't plan to keep it or anything." Lu Mian gave a short, disinterested laugh. Xiao Qimor and Yi Jingwen exchanged glances that held a hint of complexity. It seemed like the jewelry robbery involving Wu Cheng the day before had nothing to do with Boss Huang after all. Maybe the real culprit was still hiding out in his hotel. "Well, I'm heading home," Lu Mian said, standing up to leave. "Qimor, we found the suspect, but..." Yi Jingwen paused, sounding annoyed. "Someone beat us to it. They already caught the guy, tied him up, and dumped him at the police station. Did you check the security footage?" "Yeah, but Boss Huang's hotel has way too many blind spots in the cameras. The only thing we saw was a tagged car pulling up and dumping the guy. No other clues." Yi Jingwen hesitated for a moment, as if the style of this situation reminded him of someone. Before he could finish his thought, Xiao Qimor interrupted, "Since we've already found the suspect, we don't need to get involved anymore." That was the end of it. Today was the day the monthly exam results were being handed out. Before class started, the teacher made an announcement about the physics competition. 5 students from our class participated, and one of them achieved an outstanding score that surprised me. Lu Xinyuan lightly gripped her notebook, her eyes filled with anticipation. Her friend leaned closer and whispered, "Xinyuan, it's your big moment." "Don't say that. I have no idea what my score is," she said modestly, but her trembling voice betrayed her excitement. "Of course, it's me. Who else could it be? That loser Lu Mian," she thought to herself. Congratulations to Lu Mian for getting a perfect score and ranking first in the entire school. Lu Xinyuan's smile froze, and something inside her seemed to break. No way. Lu Mian finished in just an hour. How could this be? Teacher, are you sure Lu Mian didn't cheat? Cheat? That's impossible. Lu Mian was the first to finish and the only one who completed all the questions. Other students would be lucky to copy off her, but who could she have copied from? What if she got the answers beforehand? Even less likely. The last question on the test was highly debated. The competition committee was split into 2 camps with different answers. They didn't think anyone could solve it, but Lu Mian's paper opened their eyes and unified their decision. In other words, her paper became the standard answer. Lu Xinyuan knew that sometimes, the loudest complainers get what they want, but she wasn't stupid enough to snitch directly. With reddened eyes, she forced a smile and shook her head, holding back her frustration. Mom, I'm fine. I just might have disappointed you this time, she said, her voice trembling with restraint. Fu Man's heart sank. Ever since she was little, Xinyuan had always been the kind of child who reported only good news and kept her struggles to herself, making her all the more endearing and heartbreaking. Fu Man pulled Lu Xinyuan down onto the couch, and after pressing her for more details, she finally learned it was about the physics competition. But when Xinyuan mentioned that Lu Mian had scored a perfect mark, Fu Man was stunned. No matter how she thought about it, it just didn't seem possible. But Fu Man wasn't in the mood to worry about Lu Mion's situation. She comforted Lu Xinyuan, Nuan, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. This was just the preliminary round. There's still the semi-finals and finals. Maybe Lu Mion got lucky this time and scored a perfect score, but luck doesn't last forever. You're different. You have the foundation and the skills. Mom believes in your abilities. Lu Xinyuan tilted her head slightly, trying to hold back tears. How about you let my sister come back? She's out there all alone, and I'm really worried about her. Fu Man was worried too. No matter how much she scolded or criticized her, Lu Mion was still her child. But when she thought about Lu Mion's cold and distant attitude, she shook her head. Forget it. Every time she's back, she just makes me angry and distracts you from your studies. Lu Xinyuan seemed to have gotten the answer she wanted and snuggled into Fu Man's arms. Oh, Mom, can I start learning how to trade stocks with Suju? He's really good at it. He makes millions every time. I want to help pay off our family's debts as soon as possible, so you don't have to work so hard anymore, Xinyuan said, full of confidence in Suju's skills. Stocks? Fu Man didn't know much about stocks, but she had heard about the risks. How many times had she seen news reports about people jumping off buildings after losing everything in the stock market? She wasn't in a rush to pay off their debts. As long as Xinyuan kept doing well, money would be the least of their worries. Nuan, your job right now is to study. Let Mom handle the money. Mom, I just want a chance to spend more time with Suju, that's all, Xinyuan replied. Lately, she had noticed Suju's growing distance. Maybe Suju used to treat her kindly, but after seeing how successful Suju had become, Xinyuan felt the need to act fast. She couldn't let Lu Mion get any closer. You don't need to give me a lot of money, just a few thousand. We'll start small. Excited, Lu Xinyuan beamed, and Fu Man, not wanting to upset her daughter, reluctantly transferred half of her latest paycheck to her. Xinyuan smiled sweetly as she counted the money. Late at night, Lu Mion returned to Jincheng No. 1. Lazily sitting in front of her computer, she was greeted by a group of stock enthusiasts eagerly waiting for her input. After carefully analyzing a promising stock, she sent it to Lin, who took care of the rest. But unlike before, Lu Mion added something this time. Lin, go through the group members and see if there's a traitor. If there is, stop sending out info. No need, Lin replied. Even though Lin didn't quite understand, she did what she was told. The group they created had one entry rule: poverty. Lu Mion helped them make money through stock trading, but always reminded them to be cautious. Once someone's financial situation improved, they had to leave the group. If anyone suspicious slipped in, Lu Mion wouldn't let them off easy. Later, Lu Xinyuan, Suju, and Lu Mion found themselves in a small classroom. Lu Mion's arrival made her seem like an outsider, and the room, which had been noisy, suddenly fell silent. Suju shot her a look of respect. While others might not know, anyone who'd been in the physics competition knew who Lu Mion was, the genius who finished the exam in just 1 hour and scored perfectly. After a moment of awkward silence, Lu Xinyuan seemed to realize something and quickly stood up. Mion, there's no seat left. Take mine. She acted all sweet and sisterly, which made everyone else pause. Suju, sitting next to Lu Xinyuan, didn't hesitate either. He pulled out a chair and gestured for Lu Mion to sit next to her sister. But Lu Mion walked straight into the room, ignoring their friendly gestures, and jumped lightly onto the windowsill, sitting there casually. Everyone thought she was so cool. Even the fake friendliness of Lu Xinyuan couldn't compete. Awkward, Lu Xinyuan had no choice but to sit back down, and Suju did the same. Some classmates pitted the two, but no one could bring themselves to dislike Lu Mion. The meeting was mainly to discuss the students who made it to the semi-finals and details about the next competition. Lu Mion didn't want to be there, but out of nowhere, she got a text from the director. Mion, you're in a meeting, right? Are you thinking about skipping the semi-finals? But I hope you'll continue. If you make it, I'll grant you one wish. Lu Mion thought to herself, has the director put a camera on me or something? How can he read my mind so well? Her eyes lingered on the last line of the message, I'll grant you one wish. A soft smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Hey, little boy, wait for me, Lu Mion called out, her voice teasing. Just then, Yi Jingwen, who had been quietly grumbling, noticed something. His eyes widened as he pointed toward the school's flower bed. Chimo, you probably don't want to look, he said, standing in front of Xiao Chimo, trying to block his view. But Xiao Chimo, being taller, had already seen it. There, by the flower bed, was Lu Mion, talking to a girl with a buzz cut. Xiao Chimo knew the girl, her name was Sui Yuan, and she and Lu Mion had a bond like no other. As they chatted, Lu Mion kept playfully patting Sui Yuan's head, like a sneaky cat who'd just gotten into something. She even smiled warmly, a rare sight for anyone to see. Let's go, Chimo. They're just friends catching up, Yi Jingwen said. Hearing this, Xiao Chimo's face unreadable, standing firm. Of course, in the middle of it all, he didn't forget to scold the lovebirds he caught sneaking around. Yi Jingwen couldn't help but feel sorry for them. Meanwhile, Sui Yuan glanced over to where Xiao Chimo had disappeared and said softly, Mion, why's he a director now? I remember he used to be your neighbor. Lu Mion, uninterested, replied, who knows? It feels like he's been watching you this whole time, but not in a bad way. You think he likes you? Sui Yuan's voice got quieter as she snuck a glance at Lu Mion to see her reaction. Seeing that Lu Mion's expression hadn't changed, she cautiously added, he's pretty cool though. Everyone in my class looks forward to him checking in on us. Lu Mion playfully patted Sui Yuan's head again, clearly in a good mood. I think he's just trying to use me to get to that mystery person, so don't get too caught up in this love stuff. And definitely don't overestimate a guy's feelings. Sui Yuan grabbed Lu Mion's hand to stop her from messing with her head again. You sound like you know a lot about it. She paused, then asked, so, what's your plan? Lu Mion shrugged, let him figure it out himself. If he can find the mystery person, that's on him. In the director's office, Xiao Chimo sat on the couch with a calm expression, one leg casually crossed over the other. Even though he wasn't saying a word, the pressure he radiated was enough to make the two students he'd caught trembling with fear. Teacher, we were just discussing homework, the girl stammered, too scared to look up, while the boy nervously nodded along. Yes, teacher, we were just studying. Xiao Chimo didn't respond, just glanced at them, instantly knowing what they were thinking. Yi Jingwen was about to step in and say something to smooth things over, but before he could, Xiao Chimo shifted in her seat, fixed her gaze on the boy, and casually asked, so, how did you manage to get her attention? That question left everyone in the room stunned. Both the boy and girl looked over at Yi Jingwen with a desperate plea for help. Yi Jingwen thought to himself, is he seriously asking students for dating advice now? Has he lost it? Ignoring Yi Jingwen, Xiao Chimo rested his left arm on the back of the couch, his right hand holding his phone, ready to jot down notes as if this was some kind of research session. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The couple was practically shaking, especially the boy, who looked like he was about to get on his knees and beg. Teacher, I swear, we're not dating. I didn't even try to woo her with flowers, chocolates, or love letters. His voice was slow and shaky. No, we're really not. Xiao Chimo wasn't buying it. He spotted something on his wrist. What's that on your wrist? It wasn't a watch or a bracelet, but a black hair tie that was way too tight, leaving a red mark. The boy panicked, quickly trying to hide his hand behind his back. It's nothing. Just, a charm for good luck. Before Xiao Chimo could question him further, the girl took a closer look and suddenly flipped out. Li Mingho. That isn't my hair tie. Whose is that? Now Li Mingho was in full-blown panic. Xiang, I can explain. I don't care, she shot back. You promised you'd only wear the hair tie I gave you, it's a symbol of our love. Furious, Xiangxiang shoved him and stormed out of the office, tears streaming down her face. Li Mingho, looking devastated, muttered, "Teacher, you win," and ran after her.